Good evening, everybody. Are we ready to proceed? Are we being
No,
recorded?
no, the council chamber needs to sign on. Okay, I can start the recording now.
Recording in progress.
Can anybody hear us? Al says
Yes, I can.
yes. Yep. Okay. Tasha, does that mean we're ready to go?
Yes, I started the recording.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is the November 14th, 2022 regular meeting of the Town Council. And the first item on our agenda is the roll call. Ms. Chang?
Here.
Here. Bruder,
Here.
Coleman,
Here.
Cotton,
Here.
Fertoni,
Here.
Moran,
Here.
Shuren,
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a public hearing. We have a public hearing having to do with a decision regarding whether or not we should opt out or participate in or accept as town rule a state statute. Ms. Kaufman, would you explain this briefly, and then we'll do the public hearing, and then have a more, if necessary, a more detailed presentation when it comes up as an item of business. Here we go. Can we get, okay, we've got the other two council members so I can see them. Ms. Kaufman, you're on.
Good evening, Jennifer Kaufman, Director of Planning and Development. I'm happy, I do have a short presentation that kind of goes over what we're asking for, or what PA 2129 is asking for. Would you like me to give it right now, or during, when you're making your decision?
It's short, do it now.
It's very short. Okay. So as I stated in my agenda item summary, or Ryan's agenda item summary, back in 2021, PA 2129 was passed, and they looked at there's several items related to land use and zoning. And two of those items tonight are related to accessory dwelling units and parking. Right now, if you don't opt out of these two items, then you are required to follow the state standards. And opting out requires both a 2/3 vote from the Planning and Zoning Commission and a 2/3 vote from the Town Council. The ADU legislation becomes local law unless it's opted out of by January 1st, 2023, and there's no time limit for opting out of the parking provisions. However, the state law is currently in effect. So let's see here. I'm sure most of you are familiar with what an accessory dwelling unit is. It can be many shapes of sizes, detached, attached. It could be an apartment over the garage, an interior one. There's many shapes and sizes of these accessory dwelling units. In 2020, the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted regulations that made the ability to get an accessory dwelling unit much easier. We updated the terminology. We changed the review process. That was probably one of the most important things that we did, from a special permit to a zoning permit. We eliminated the minimum lot area requirements. We allowed for the accessory dwelling units to be located in detached structures and added specific design standards to ensure compatibility with residential neighborhoods. And we strengthened the owner occupancy requirements by requiring owners to declare a restriction on the land records. So those are just some of the things that we've done. There are many areas in which the town's regulations are consistent with PA 2129, but there are several areas where we are not. PA 2129 requires that accessory dwelling units are allowed in any single-family zone. We allow it in our RAR 90, or basically the 2-acre zone, and the Storage Center Special Design District. One of the main things that where we differ is that we require owner occupancy within our accessory dwelling units. Or either the principal dwelling has to be owner occupied, or the accessory dwelling has to be owner occupied. So right now we are, it is pretty straightforward to get an accessory dwelling unit, but there are areas where we differ from what the state is stating in PA 2129. So there's a couple actions that you have before you. One is to opt out, and we can maintain existing regulations related to the accessory dwelling units that Planning and Zoning has. You can opt out of the accessory dwelling units held in Public Act 2129 and support the Planning and Zoning Commission's efforts to review the town zoning regulations. They are committed to doing that, just to looking at what PA 2129 says and making sure that it's easier and it reflects the goals of the Mansfield Plan of Conservation and Development. And option 2 is do not opt out and comply with PA 2129. And it's important to note that last week, the Planning and Zoning Commission did vote unanimously to opt out of both the ADU and the parking standards. So real quick, the existing parking regulations that the town has, we require 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit, regardless of how many bedrooms. Let's see, but for PA 2129, unless specific exceptions are noted, I'm sorry. It's two spaces for each dwelling unit. So basically, if you opt out and it's the same thing. You can opt out and maintain existing regulations related to parking, opt out of the parking standards, and encourage the Planning and Zoning Commission to review the regulations to be consistent with the Mansfield Plan of Conservation and Development, or do not opt out and comply with PA 2129. So, there, and was the legal notice? Okay.
All right, so to open the public hearing, then we start with the reading of the legal notice.
Mansfield Town Council, hearing at 7 p.m. at its meeting on November 14th, 2022, to solicit public comment regarding out of standards for dwelling units and parking pursuant to public. At this hearing, persons may address the council and communication may be received. Information regarding the request is filed and available in the office for South Mansfield. Dated at Mansfield, Connecticut, this first day of November.
Thank you. Is there anybody here to speak to this public hearing? Is there anybody online who wishes to speak to this public hearing? Hearing nobody, seeing nobody, I will now declare this public hearing closed. Next item on our agenda is an opportunity for the public to address the council on any issues. Is there anybody here who wishes to address the council? Please come forward. Let me quickly say some of the rules. You have to identify yourself, name and address. There's a 5-minute limit on speaking. It is absolutely necessary to put your mouth right in front of the microphone, otherwise you're not picked up. So you may begin. Welcome.
Testing.
You're on.
Okay. I am Vicki Weatherall, 33 Summit Road. Although I am a member of the Parks and Natural Resources Committee, I am addressing the council as president, and my comments are not related to the committee's work. My concern is about the proposed an apartment redevelopment on Route 275 and its threefold increase in the number of apartments. First, the environmental impact statement, which you're considering tonight, analyzes pedestrian traffic only for trips to and from campus. It does not analyze pedestrian traffic from the apartment's location to the store's downtown businesses. From my experience, since the construction of the downtown area, at least half of the pedestrian traffic at the 275-195 intersection crosses 195 toward the businesses in the downtown area. They use the pedestrian light that stops traffic on both roads. The EIE, meaning the environmental impact evaluation, needs to address an increase in the people crossing 195 and their impact on the number of vehicles waiting at this intersection. Second, the EIE should address the socioeconomic impact of increased traffic, which will make it more difficult to access our town center. This is where we come to shop for groceries, go to the post office, do business at the town hall, recreate at the community center, attend meetings, and enjoy social events. Residents need to have easy access to these activities and not be discouraged from activities by increased traffic congestion. Although the EIE addresses only the impact of the proposed apartments, there are other potential sources of traffic at intersection of routes 275 and 195. A proposed commercial development on the corner by the apartments, and future development of private land across 195 from the apartments. In light of all these potential sources of increased traffic, I suggest that the council make a formal statement to the university noting the incompatible nature of a large apartment complex in this location, and recommending that the size of the development be reduced. Several years ago, the university proposed another incompatible development of their land on Route 275 that was a hockey rink. As they did with the hockey rink, the university located it elsewhere on their land. Likewise, the university can look elsewhere on its land to build a 900-bed apartment building. Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council? Please come forward.
My name is Aaron Bowman. I live at 1308 Stafford Road in Mansfield, Connecticut. I'd like to address the council tonight just to bring some awareness. I am not new to the area, but I am new to the community. We moved in here beginning of the school year. So as a father with multiple children in the school system, I decided to start looking at all the information that the town puts out, and you guys do an amazing job on your social media and your town website to get all the information out. I've been able to catch up with all the YouTube videos from all the previous meetings to see what's been going on. So since I do have small children, I was looking at the Mansfield Youth Service Facebook page, and something kind of stuck out to me, which I thought might be a little concerning, especially to myself as a parent. Going through their posts back to about the beginning of 2021, there were 22 posts about the LGBTQ lifestyle or community. Suicide and crisis line, there were 4 posts on that, and those were mostly during the National Suicide Prevention Week, and there weren't really anything else outside of that. COVID-19 vaccination too, which is a great thing. You know, we don't need a whole bunch of that being put out there. Human trafficking 1 and mental health 1. And the reason why I bring this up is because statistically looking, if you do a quick search and look up anything on the LGBT community, especially youth between 13 and 24, there is a, what is it? It's the 4 times more likely to attempt or think about attempting suicide. There's also, out of 1.8 million LGBTQ youth, 13 to 24, seriously considered suicide each year in the U.S., and at least 1 attempts suicide every 45 seconds. So considering that there are so many posts on the Manson Youth Services Facebook page in general, I think that there needs to be more of a balance as far as pushing forward more mental health for the youth here in Mansfield, especially as a father having, like I said, multiple children in the school system. And there was also another survey done that 82% of the youth between 13 and 24 participated and wanted more mental health. And I don't think it's very balanced what is on that Facebook page. And it would be great to, you know, just bring some awareness to the council and the town, and hopefully see more of a balance on posting that's being put out there for the youth, because this is a platform that a lot of youth are on. And then even maybe some more conservative and wholesome family things out there, as opposed to just this one narrative that seems to be being pushed. And especially with the suicide in that demographic, I think it's very important that we start realizing that and providing those services to the youth in town. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council? Okay, you missed my announcement, so name and address, please. 5-minute limit. Speak right into the mic.
Andrew Latiga, 860 Stafford Road, Storrs, Connecticut. Is this where I can give my approval? I know you guys are working on the cannabis regulations. Can I speak on that?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say that I have been trying to follow up with a lot of the towns and what they're looking to do with their moratoriums, and I am in support of it. I know the college has a cannabis program that they're actually looking to, you know, that they've had for quite some time, and I think it's a really good progressive thing, you know, moving forward. I also have property in Coventry and in Bolton, and I know they're also looking at their regulations as well too. And just recently, they're having the lottery systems going on right now that allows for the licenses and licensures of some of these cannabis licenses. And my wife and I actually just were able to win one of the licenses, or 2 of the licenses for a certain transporter license for the state of Connecticut. And I'm looking to try to get more information at some point, not necessarily during this meeting, but I would like to see if there's other ways that you know, I might be able to you know, facilitate you know, some sort of permit in town, and you know, kind of get established with a business like that. And I don't know if there's any specific details I need to know. I know this is kind of new and you're under a moratorium status right now. And I just wanted to, you know, I guess just put that out there that, you know, we have the only 2 licenses in the entire state of Connecticut for this license. And I know UConn is a testing lab as well too, for the products. And I'm looking forward to, I guess, you know, working closely with the town and seeing what they end up doing with some of the regulations. And we're willing to help out in any way as, you know, moving forward as well with the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. Check out new business item D on tonight's agenda. If you can hang out that long, you'll learn quite a bit about where we are.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council? Seeing no one, I will close the opportunity for public comment and move on to the report of the town manager. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to, excuse me, happy to report that this past Tuesday, we had a successful general election here in town. Successful from the standpoint of smoothly run polling places and our EDR location here. Somewhere in the neighborhood of about 70% of our registered voters cast ballots. On a personal note, I just want to say, extend a sincere thank you and voice my appreciation for the registrars, the election workers, everybody involved, including the town clerk's office, who obviously plays a critical role with absentee ballots. It took a team, and I know in recent election years, it had been a little less smooth on election day, and so testament to everybody's willingness to learn from past issues, and Jamie and his folks in IT especially for helping to ensure that technology didn't come back to bite us. And so much appreciation for that. With the general election now complete, I just want to let the council know that I'm continuing to move forward with the plans that had been in place for a meeting between some of our senior management team and our state legislators to talk about higher profile town projects that we hope our legislators will support. We also, as I understand, it's past tradition to invite our legislators shortly after the election to come meet with the council as well. So perhaps we could arrange for that to happen on around the same time, but I'm checking in on everybody's availability. And right now it looks like it'll probably be the week after Thanksgiving. So perhaps this could be something that we roll into the next council meeting, but we can talk about that when it comes time to explore that agenda. As the mayor knows, she attended an event today. We didn't get a chance to connect earlier, so hopefully you made it. Yep. Okay, so, I won't steal your thunder other than to say we're very happy that the town has been recertified as a silver level sustainable community by Sustainable CT. And, we continue to improve on our aggregate score. Silver is the highest rating that you can achieve currently. They're rolling out a gold level designation, and in 3 years' time, when we're up for recertification again, I'm sure we'll be setting our sights on that. But big thank you to Virginia Walton and all members of our staff, and we had a UConn intern, Thomas, who was instrumental in this, and just want to say that it's great. It's a reflection of our community and our values. And of course, sustainability is not just environmental sustainability, but as socio-political and economic dimensions as well. And we continue to make great progress. Just a few other items. The council, you obviously received a presentation in September relative to where things are at with concepts we've explored for potential renovations or basically looking at new concepts for our municipal facilities that meet our needs. And I wanted to let the council know that as we've been talking about stakeholder engagement and public engagement and the need for a robust, comprehensive public engagement process as we move forward with this, staff is giving a lot of thought to ways in which we might be able, and I underscore might be able to incorporate or integrate multiple municipal projects and initiatives that are ongoing right now that have a very important stakeholder engagement piece. So using municipal facilities as an example, we've talked about Goodwin School, right? And we've talked about potential future uses of the Goodwin School building and that property. And we do, in fact, have the opportunity to open up a new elementary school, and that can become decommissioned as a school. So what's the future of that building? Well, just as we're looking at that from the standpoint of our municipal facilities needs assessment, we're also involved in, or will be undertaking, I should say, a neighborhood stabilization plan. And Goodwin School is an anchor for that part of the community, and its future plays heavily into how we plan for that neighborhood and what public sentiment is for the future of that neighborhood. So again, just using that as one example where if you imagine all the different stakeholder forums, summits, surveys, et cetera, that we might put out there, through no fault of our own, it could just unintentionally get pretty confusing for the public. Trying to keep straight, well, what project is this? What initiative is this? So if we can work to orchestrate stakeholder engagement around all of this in a way that kind of ties things together and dovetails things, I think it'll really improve efficiency. So we'll see if that can be achieved, but I just want to let everybody know that that's part of the reason why we've been moving forward at a little bit more measured pace with the next phase of the facilities study. And I think, in the interest of time, I did want to say, it was wonderful to take part in the Veterans Day. I guess it was the week before Veterans Day, but the November 4th luncheon at the Senior Center. Sorry that the mayor and Councilor Cotton weren't able to attend, but it was my pleasure to read the proclamation in your absence. They had a phenomenal program. The singing trooper who has garnered national acclaim was there, getting everybody singing and dancing. It was around 100 attendees, and just big kudos to all the Senior Center staff, the volunteers, the community sponsors. It's a fantastic event, and the food, which I unfortunately didn't get to stay to enjoy, but I've heard great things about it. Country catering. So this was the first time in about 3 years, I think, since we'd had an in-person Veterans Day luncheon because of the pandemic. And people seem to really appreciate being able to get back together in the same room and obviously honor our veterans, but enjoy one another's fellowship. And so I will stop there and happy to field any questions the council may have.
Questions for the town manager? None? Wow. All right. We go. I had the opportunity to attend the ceremony in West Hartford for Celebrate Connecticut, and we received our silver award. A number of towns were there who had received awards twice, but we went from. I think we were one of the very few who went from silver to silver. And as I said, I had been hoping that we would be going for gold. They have just announced the standards for the gold certification. It includes a much more extensive commitment to quality of everything from achieving equity in our community to financial stability, environmental sustainability, and community engagement. So this is obviously going to be a work for the future. It's obviously also something which, as the council sets its goals, we should look at whether achieving these particular qualities are part of our own goals. So, for example, we may say that we really want to have as our goals a progress toward equity, for example. I'm sure that next time around, after the school has been opened, we will fill all the categories for environmental consciousness between that and the solar power. So there's where we're going. The other thing that was very interesting is that Sustainable Connecticut is just celebrating 5 years of existence. And it went from no towns to 129 certified towns. So the actions of a small founding community have really reverberated around the state in very dramatic ways. One of the other things that was very gratifying is that several of the speakers acknowledged one of the person they described as the grandmother of Sustainable Connecticut, our own Betsy Patterson. So it was unfortunate that she was unable to attend today because she was very much a center of attention. So it was a very good experience and a lovely event. And it's always nice to know how Mansfield has contributed, and also how well we are doing in these fields. I think that is all I have to say in comments. Does anybody else have anything? Add? Jacob.
Thanks. I just wanted to add my word of thanks to everyone who made the election last week run smoothly. The registrars of voters in particular, both Ann Grenadier and Vera Ward, who dealt with the redistricting and significant changes to the election day registration system. Everything ran incredibly smoothly in town. I don't think there was longer than a line, than a few minutes at election day registration, which is, turnout was a little lower, but was in stark contrast to the first 2 years of it that occurred when UConn students were on campus in 2016 and 2018. I also want to just say thank you to Ryan, who, municipal government isn't actually directly responsible, with the exception of the town clerk, who processes the absentee ballots for anything in an election. There's no requirement that the municipality actually make things work well for the registrars. They're kind of technically on their own island, and Ryan, I think, really reached out and made sure that town staff and resources, technological and otherwise, were available to our registrars of voters to make things run smoothly, and that town hall was set up in such a way to process 565 students who registered and voted on election day. And then just finally, a word of thanks. Personally, Charlie and I were at town hall until 2 o'clock in the morning, not in our capacity as counselors, but in our political lives. And despite being very, very tired, Vera and Ann and their deputies spent the evening locked in a room counting ballots because they needed to be counted that night and really couldn't be waited until the morning at the time. And so thank you to them for the hard work that it takes to put on an election. Thanks to everyone who came out and voted.
Thank you. This is the first time I've missed an entire election season due to surgery and COVID, so it felt very weird not to be part of any of it, but there you have it. Mr. Osberger.
I just have two brief things. One, I wanted to thank Ben for facilitating our McDonald's Election Day junta. And secondarily, I attended a roundtable, which is in part due to a project that I'd begun working on with respect to art space that we all thought was a great idea. And there was a roundtable in the Nash Zimmer Center where there were representatives from many different groups, not to be forgotten. Ballad Puppetry Museum, several artists came in. There were about 24 people in the room, and all discussed going forward. And when I brought up, the first third of the discussion was pretty much discussing who we were and what we do. And the first third of the room, there was a little bit of despair that there was not enough money going towards the arts. And so when it finally came to me, I said, well, I'm glad you should say that, because... And they were pleasantly surprised. And of course, Ann Williams was in the room from the Art Advisory Committee and said yes. And so it's good that this project has moved.
Would you describe the project for those who are listening?
Well, our project, first it started off as an artist who approached me and said, we really need some sort of an art space, perhaps at the skate park, for the kids, instead of having creating graffiti, maybe we could redirect that energy into some space for people to be able to express themselves. And then that kind of ballooned into, well, maybe we could have several places at the community center. And then that ballooned into, well, perhaps we could have places all around town, and perhaps very much like a wine trail, have an art trail. And so that's about where it is at this point. Our town manager, Ryan, is looking into the different mediums that could facilitate this, looking into what is the best design, and we may be looking at perhaps some video, some a little bit harder spaces like perhaps cement. Different types of mediums are being explored right now, and it's really been pretty much in its infancy, but that's where we're at with it.
There is a part of the town manager's report that refers to this particular effort. There is also a plan, and I don't remember exactly what stage we're at, to allocate some of our ARPA money, some of our COVID money towards supporting the arts.
Right, and that's actually largely what Mr. Osberger is referring to. So the $75,000 that the council approved for basically an arts relief fund, and the allowable uses under the rescue plan are pretty broad, in terms of how it's used to promote art. And I think Charlie, or Mr. Osberger characterized it accurately. We're still exploring a lot of the different ideas. It's still, I don't want to say primordial ooze phase, but we're maybe a little bit further along than that. But it would be the intent to come back to the council with an update on how those dollars would be allocated for this sort of public art that Mr. Osberger is referring to, and yeah, and as he said, geographically sort of diverse across multiple parts of town.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Bruder?
Having been a member of the community center for a while, I hadn't realized that there's, I don't know if it's a new program, or I just wanted to make other people aware, because my kids are taking full advantage of the teen center. You don't need to be a member. You just go in, as a parent, you sign a permission slip, and then there's some set hours specifically for middle school versus high school. And, it's been a great place for at least my twins, who are in 6th grade, to go and play table tennis or pool, and, play around with their homework while they're just socializing. It's been something I wasn't aware of until they told me. So
You're developing a pair of pool sharks, huh?
don't get me started.
Anybody have anything else to comment on? Mr. Coleman?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a comment about the town council meeting before Veterans Day. Veterans Day meetings in the past, the council, number one, we pledged the flag. I honestly think that the council should pledge the flag before each and every of our meetings, as well as give an opportunity for the council members who have served in our military services to dress in uniform and speak and have a ceremony on the day of the town council meeting before Veterans Day.
Thank you. You may recall that we changed the rules of procedure to eliminate those 4 pre-council ceremonial sessions this past year, I think, or the year before, we changed those rules. Any further comments? All right, then the next item on our business agenda is the consent agenda. There are 3 items on it. Approval of the minutes of October 24th, approval for the state police to apply for a grant for extra funding for DUI monitoring, and the financial statements, which were heard by the Finance Committee this evening, and I believe you recommended them for approval to the council. So would somebody please move the consent agenda?
I would like to pull the financials out of the consent agenda for discussion.
All right. Would somebody like to recommend the consent agenda, the minutes, and the grant application? Mr. Bruder?
So moved.
Is there a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous. Then we will add the financial statements under 8B of old business. Don't let me forget. Okay. The first item of business is the accessory dwelling units and parking parking opt-out option that we had the public hearing on. Now, this is not a proposed ordinance, it's a proposed action. We don't need a special vote to approve immediately following the hearing. Since there was no hearing, there were no comments in the public hearing, and since the Planning and Zoning Board voted unanimously to pursue the opt-out provision, it seems to me that the direction for the council is fairly clear. The motion is on page 111 of your, second, I gotta find. All right, the motion is on 112. Is there somebody who would like to move? Mr. Bruder? Well, we can ask some questions as part of the debate, or would you want to hold off on your motion?
Might be easier to, it's
Okay.
just, so I just want to make sure I understand.
Sure. Ms. Kaufman?
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I just want to make sure I understand it.
Sure.
I think I do.
Okay.
So part of it is that we want to preserve the requirement for owner occupancy, and were we to adopt the state rule, we would lose that. That's part of it.
Correct. That's our understanding at this time. Yep.
The part I'm having a little more difficulty with is the parking piece. And it says, shall not require more than one parking space for each studio or one bedroom dwelling unit, or more than 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit with 2 or more bedrooms. So it sounds like not require more spaces than beds, essentially.
Right. So
I'm curious why that's not sort of adoptable as, like, why are we, what is the worry there?
well, I think the worry is that right now we require 2 spots per unit, regardless of the bedrooms. And I think planning and zoning is committed to looking at those regulations, and they want to look at them carefully and just make sure that it's just not sort of a one-size-fits-all situation. But I think my understanding from working with them is that they probably will land closer to the what is stated in PA 2129, but they just need a minute to kind of review that to make sure it is appropriate. But in generally, I would say that they would concur, if that's what you're saying, that we probably are mandating too many parking spots, but they need to study that a little bit.
As always, thanks for your excellent answering of my questions.
Sure.
Anybody have any more factual questions for Ms. Kaufman? Mr. Shaken? Followed?
Oh,
Okay.
Could you pull your presentation back up? It's down on the, can you just show the chart on slide 4? It went through it too quickly. Could you go through with a little bit more time than a
Sure.
very fast presentation, where and how we
let's share the
differ from the
screen.
statute? Because it looks like there's a lot. Oh, sorry, yeah, and share the screen.
I think that it looks like there's more than there actually is, but I will definitely go through this. So basically, PA 2129, it's allowing accessory dwelling units basically as of right in any single-family residence. So it's as of right, you meet the setbacks, you get the accessory dwelling unit. Right now, we're stating that accessory apartments are enabled in the RAR 90, R90, and then R20, and Storage Center Special Design District. And they're allowed by zoning permit.
Can I interrupt? I
Sure.
know basically any new construction in the town, or most of the residential areas, RER 90, which is a
Correct.
2-acre zoning lot.
Yes.
Can you explain what's R90 and R20?
So R20 would be more near Circle Drive. That R20 is 20,000 square feet, so we don't have a huge amount of neighborhoods that are zoned for R20, but it's more of a smaller lot.
It's a half an acre.
Yeah,
square feet.
exactly.
And
yes.
R90 is?
R90 is, it's just residents, 90,000 square feet, so residents, 2 acres, and that's a very small district, a very small zone near like the Hillendale area, so,
So by current zoning regulation,
yes.
anything that is 1 acre lot zoning
Yep.
would not be allowed in ADU as of right?
We don't have 1 acre zoning as, now it's all RAR 90 or R90, so those 1 acre zones are actually non-conforming, but yes, they would be allowed in
They're in
accessory.
RAR 90, even Olson, where I used to live on Olson
Yes.
Drive, where they're 1 acre lots, that's an old neighborhood.
Yes, that's RAR 90,
Got
so
it.
they would
Thank
be
you.
allowed. Yep. Let's see. So then another area where we are different is we require a separate entrance, distinct from any entrance used to access portions of the building. So when planning and zoning, when they developed these regulations back in 2020, they wanted to make sure that there were a few design criteria so that it didn't look necessarily like a two-family. They may need to look at that again, and they are committed to doing so. It's just they did this back in 2020. We also have occupancy limits to adults, persons, and children under the age of 18. And then, let's see. The PA 2129 does not have any occupancy limits.
Are those occupancy limits for the accessory apartment, but not for the main apartment?
Correct. That's for the accessory
So
dwelling.
if I
unit,
had
yeah.
a 500 square foot accessory, 500 square foot owner occupied, I could put 18 people in it, but I could only put 2 adults and 2 kids in the much larger main house.
If you live there, say that again?
So, no, the ADU
Yep.
has the limit. Okay, so I can only put 2 adults and 2 kids in the ADU, but in
Right.
the other house, I can put as many people as I want,
Correct. If you're a family of
15 kids.
exactly. Right. Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah. And I may bring up here, 'cause he's the one who issues these permits every single day, but frequently. Ins and outs of all of this. Let's see. So the other place we differ is we require 3 off-street parking spaces. And then the deed restriction. And that deed restriction states that either the principal dwelling or the accessory dwelling needs to be owner occupied, and that's filed on the land records. Let's see, you do have to submit a notarized statement on every 5 years. It used to be every 2 years that you'd come in with an affidavit stating that there was one of the either the principal or the efficiency department was owner occupied. So we require a separate entrance. Went over occupancy. Am I missing anything else? I think PA 2129 really, it's just saying you can have an accessory dwelling unit almost as of right, provided you meet certain setbacks. I think Planning and Zoning Commission wants to take a good look at this because they do, I think we are seeing a greater demand for accessory dwelling units. I think in some instances, it can really help people to age in place, to gain income from their homes. And it really, they wanted to do this so that we would have more affordability in Mansfield and people could stay in Mansfield. So, there, Ben?
Oh, that's helpful.
Okay.
That's my-
Mr. Bruder?
Thank you. I just was wanting to question the idea that the Planning and Zoning Commission may take a look at our current, like if we opt out, they're going to take a look at what is already in the books in terms of how it might be prohibitive to like affordable housing. Like I know that for, this is a question.
Yeah, sure.
And then, so is that true? Is that
So
kind of an,
they will, in terms of affordable housing?
like the Mansfield Tomorrow Plan of Conservation and Development that support affordable housing and sustainability? That's what I'm,
Right, they're looking at all of our regulations, but they want to make sure, I think they really want to make sure that it is fairly straightforward to get an accessory dwelling unit in Mansfield. However, they do want to make sure that, we have a different community here in Mansfield, and so they want to make sure that it maintains more affordability, and if it were just as of right, I think there's a little bit of fear that that would not be the case.
okay. Yeah, and I know that for let me ask this as a question. Do you know of an argument that if you have too many requirements for parking spots, that it's kind of prohibits some of the affordable housing that you can build?
Yeah, I would think they'd want to take a look at the number of parking spaces, and I think parking is something that they have discussed quite a bit, and they definitely want to take a look at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Shaken.
I have another factual question. Not often that there's a state or federal law that lets the lesser level of government opt out from it. So can you explain why we have the ability to say, never mind, we don't want to comply with a state statute?
I don't know why that is the case. I think.
Or how it works if, you know, why the legislature, like, if we opted out tonight,
Yep.
could we bring our zoning regulations, our parking regulations in compliance with it and stop opting out? Or if we didn't opt out tonight, could we change our zoning regulations and decide to opt out at a later date?
No, for parking, yes, you can opt out at any point. For ADUs, if you don't opt out by January 1st, you must meet the state standards.
You get a second crack at the bite at the apple. Like if PZC decides they don't want to change anything, but the council decided that we wanted to do differently, could we opt back in? Would we take
well-
back our vote?
I think you could, if there are specific things that you'd like to see in the regulations. I mean, the Planning and Zoning Commission always refers regulations out to the town council, and I'm sure they would be happy to hear what you have to say and consider that. But there are a number of things that they weigh when they're adopting new regulations.
Are there other zoning-related state statutes that municipalities are required to comply with that give municipalities the option to opt out of them?
I'm not sure about that, actually. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there have been, state statute where we've decided to opt out, but I know that these are the two that are before you this evening, so.
Mr. Shuren.
Some just naive questions, forgive me. Who wouldn't be allowed to create? What would be the size of a lot that would prohibit you from having one of these units?
The size of lot. So if you're in anything but a 2-acre zone or a half-acre zone or the Storrs Center Design District, you would not be permitted. So if you're in Four Corners or the Eastbrook Mall area, right now you can't get a zoning permit for an accessory dwelling unit. The Planning and Zoning Commission may say, well, why don't we, if there's a residence in the PB3, which is the Four Corners area, then they should be allowed to do that too. I'm not sure that's something that they're going to have to look at.
And second, again, a naive question. I assume that there are utility availability and other requirements that must be conformed before you can.
Yes, you have to meet the health code and the building code and all of that, yes.
This is a case-by-case permitting thing that would have to be.
Right.
Okay, any more factual questions? Mr. Bruder, would you like to make your motion?
I move effective November 14th, 2022, to opt out of the accessory dwelling unit and parking requirements detailed in Public Act 21-29. Further, the Town Council supports the Planning and Zoning Commission's efforts to review the town's zoning regulations related to accessory dwelling units and parking standards so that they are reflective of the goals and actions of the Mansfield Tomorrow Plan of Conservation and Development that support affordable housing and sustainability.
Do I have a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds. Discussion. Mr. Shaken.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that I support this, with the exception of supporting the need to continue to have an owner occupancy requirement on dwellings that have accessory dwelling units or houses that have accessory dwelling units. There's two reasons for it. The first one is that while I think we tried to be on the forefront here in Mansfield by making ADU is very easy to build. And we should be commended for that, and Planning and Zoning Commission should be commended for that. We now have state statute that, at least if every other town doesn't opt out of it, which I can't imagine why towns unfriendly to affordable housing wouldn't. There's now a standard that's less restrictive than ours that theoretically every other municipality in the state is required to follow. And so if you are someone who is looking for an affordable place to live or looking to build an affordable place on your property or whatever, or a family member or anyone, you would have an easier time doing it in a town in compliance with PA 2119 than in Mansfield. So while I think there's pieces of what PZC did that make a lot of sense, now we have a state standard that's less restrictive. And I don't want to be in a position where we have zoning regulations that are more restrictive on affordable housing development than what the state has told municipalities they need to do. With the exception of, because of our college population and the fact that people trying to turn a buck like buying houses with apartment units, they can rent both sides, which we don't allow here. So with the exception of the owner occupancy requirement. So I'm not really sure how to do that. You can't opt out of a piece, you kind of have to opt out of all of it. With the exception of maybe not opting out of the parking provision and letting the state statute remain in force until PZC adjusts their regulations, at which point we could opt out if they're not the same as 2119. I'm not uncomfortable with the assurance that PZC is going to look at this in due time, but I would be more comfortable if we had somewhat more of a concrete assurance from them, like a letter announcing their intent to fix things. I guess there's a number of things on that list of requirements and statute that we are more restrictive of that are good ideas, perhaps in a vacuum, but now would make it more difficult to have a unit on your property than if you went to Tolland and in theory they didn't opt out. So I'm not sure how to vote on it, whether we should amend it, whether we should table it and ask C on Monday to send us an official letter declaring their intent to bring our zoning regulations as much as in compliance with the statute as our community would allow. Sorry to throw a bomb in the middle of it, but those are my thoughts for right now.
Ms. Berthelot, followed by Mr. Coleman.
So the one worry is if we push it off to January, it has to be resolved by January because of the issue of owner occupancy. But it looks like the parking piece doesn't have to be voted on at that point. So could we do the owner occupancy and push back the parking part?
It's a
No.
question of facts, so go ahead and answer.
Yes, you may do that. You can choose just to opt out of one or the other. The Planning and Zoning Commission is undergoing a full and comprehensive rewrite of the whole regulation. So I would think that they're going to get to this early in 2023. And with a nudge, I mean, you certainly could request that of them, that you see this as an important priority for them, but they are doing a whole range of zoning regulation changes. So that's just.
Wish to speak? No. Well, if everybody else has spoken, Mr. Coleman, sorry, I forgot. Go ahead.
Yeah, PA 21-29 was made into law October 1st of 2021. And here we are 6 weeks away from the deadline of January 1st. And this is our first discussion on this. And I find that hard to believe that we're discussing this so close to the deadline date. And I think the deputy mayor brings up some good points. And I think PA-21-29 was all about affordable housing. And Mansfield is not doing a good job with our affordable housing, right? The state requires 10% the housing stock to be affordable. I think we're sitting at around 6.8% of our housing stock. We haven't increased our affordable housing availability. And there's something else that you have to keep in mind with our affordable housing and who's actually occupying it. We have the University of Connecticut close by, and a lot of graduate students from the university qualify for low-income housing and occupy apartments at Palinko Estates and elsewhere in town, which further reduces our housing stock for families. So I think we got to be careful about opting out on this, and I really wish that we had more time to discuss this. I wish this came forward maybe last November, not this November. We had all sorts of time to discuss this, and here we are on the 11th hour, just like we always do things in this town on the 11th hour. We don't have time to make an educated decision on this. There are a lot of questions that need to be asked, and we don't want to, act, hasty in this issue on affordable housing, because we're failing at our affordable housing in this town. We're doing a terrible job.
Thank you. And anybody else?
Would these units be naturally occurring affordable housing or counted toward our quota of affordable?
They would not count as affordable housing, and whether or not they're naturally occurring or not is dependent upon market forces. So there's no guarantee that these would be affordable housing.
Mr. Bruder and then Mr. Shaken for the second time.
It's true unless they put a deed restriction, correct?
Correct, and you can't require that of, my understanding, and I'd have to go back and really dig in deep, I don't believe you can require that per PA 2129.
You can't require it to be
A deed
affordable.
restriction, correct, for affordability.
Mr. Shaken.
I'm going to use my second time here with a question and then another, and maybe an idea. I'm just quickly trying to read the Public Act summary, and there's a number of things, or at least a couple things that were on your chart that the Public Act appears to be silent on. Is it your understanding at this point that things that the Public Act is silent on would be prohibited if a municipality regulated them if they did not opt out? Or is it your understanding that if the Public Act is silent on them, then the regulations, contents in the Public Act are the totality of what a municipality can regulate? And if you aren't sure, has anyone asked Kevin?
I did have a conversation with Kevin about this, and the way he described this to me is that you need a zoning permit. You'd have to have a zoning permit, but provided you meet certain setbacks, there's nothing really else that you can require as part of that zoning permit. So right now, when someone applies for a zoning permit for an accessory dwelling unit, we check off all the boxes. Jillian can go through the list. We would not be able to do that if we did not opt out, and we would not be able to put the owner occupancy requirement on the land records. That is my understanding from Kevin. He did not put anything in writing, but that was what we discussed on Thursday.
So while I still have the floor, my preference, since we have until January 1st, is to make a motion to table this item and put it on our next meeting's agenda. And number one, ask the Planning and Zoning Commission, Paul or someone would come or write us a letter. They have a meeting in between now and then, I imagine, next week. And with some more details about their intent to bring our regulations in conformity with most of the pieces of 21-29A, and then B, to have Kevin be here to talk a little bit about this, just because I'm reading, and I maybe should have read this before the meeting, but I'm trying to read the Public Act summary now, and I don't see, in at least how the Office of Legislative Research has summarized the statute, where the legislature is requiring a municipality not there are things the regulations may not require that some of which our regulations do, but for example, an owner occupancy clause is not one of them. And there's several other ones that were on your chart that we ask for that the statute appears silent on. So I'd just like to get some more information, at least about that, from Kevin directly and from Planning and Zoning Commission. So since I'm on my second time speaking, I think I have to make a motion to table or I lose my chance. So I'm going to do that.
Is there a second to the motion to table? Ms. Berthelot seconds. My recollection is that motions to table are not debatable. So, feeling a bit grumpy since I didn't get to have my say before you made your motion.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. All those in favor of tabling?
Get to have it.
All right. Unanimous to table. Okay.
I just
So-
wanted to say on Kevin Deneen's behalf, he was planning to be here tonight. I'm not sure, maybe something came up, but he was planning to attend to speak to this.
Okay.
Can
Well,
I
he'll
make
get
one
another chance.
Can I make a request? Oh, he's here.
I am here.
We just voted.
We just voted to table. Do you want to vote to rescind your motion so we can continue the discussion, or to
Can you?
reconsider, or do you want to just table it?
There were-
Madam Mayor, if I had listened carefully to that debate, I'd be happy to come back at the next meeting, but because there's some fairly detailed things that Deputy Mayor Shaken was asking, and I've read through that and did have that discussion with Jennifer on that. So if you want to take it up now, that's fine. If we want to take it another time, I'd be happy to.
I think the council is fairly united in wanting to take it up at our next meeting.
Okay.
Can I just ask that, matter of practice, but also for this one specifically, that we get the presentation sent out? It's not in our packet, so the chart of differences you could have come up with, but I didn't see it until tonight. So I don't have a PowerPoint in my packet unless I'm scrolling through it quickly. I don't see it.
All right, so the opting out of the state requirement is tabled, and we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the financial statements. Mr. Shaken, would you start the discussion?
Yes. Ryan, is Sherry with us or not? If she's not. I'm just
She is not.
Okay. So the Finance Committee met earlier this evening before the meeting and went through two items, one of which I'll talk about later. The first thing that we did was go through the financial statements for the first quarter of the year. There is, I would say, not a ton of things that are out of the ordinary in the financial statements. And so that is primarily because it's the first quarter of the year, and so we're only a few months into the year, and that's we're only a few months past what we've budgeted, and so there's not a ton of variance. I'm just sort of scrolling through the overview, which starts on page 56 of your packet. This is all the different funds that the town receives, both in revenue and expenditures. There is, we're kind of on track, basically, in places where it appears like, oh, we seem to have gotten half in early or whatever. It's generally because the state issues grants in that way. One thing to note that I picked up from the meeting from this area is that our interest income has picked back up or stabilized. There was a hit last year. On the expenditure side, to note, the cafeteria fund is being depleted relatively rapidly. That's because our schools are still providing free lunches, which is still being paid for at this point by the state government. But just like the federal grant program that the state replaced, the grant doesn't cover our full costs, and so the cafeteria fund has been picking that up. The board put some more money in that fund at the end of last fiscal year for those of you who send your kids to school and have been wondering when it's going to end, the state thinks their grant money is going to run out around the end of the calendar year, at which point the board is planning on resuming charging students for lunches. Possibility that the state steps in prior to it running out and extends it as well. You'll recall this was a federal program under the COVID relief things that the state has now, for at least this fiscal year and perhaps part of last fiscal year, I don't recall, funded out of the state's budget. There was a question in the committee about the impact of inflation, and the biggest place that you may see that is in the Managed Services Fund, which is Management Services Fund, is on page 58. This is where we pay for all of our energy, and so this is where all of the entities that the town manages, both school districts and et cetera, pay their bills, basically. Obviously, energy costs are through the roof, and there's going to, and we're hitting the winter when we're going to need a lot of them. And there also will be, at some point, some impact on this fund because we've been operating 2 schools instead of 1, and now that it's cold and the building is enclosed, as construction is completed, we are currently heating a third for the construction workers to finish their job. So maybe not to the level we'd heat it if there were kids there, but the heat's on. Right, it's heat pumps, and so it's better, but still, we have oil heat at two school buildings. That was, I'm sure, pumping this morning, and will be until the school is completed. Otherwise, there wasn't much else I think that the council needs to get told about from me, but I'm happy to answer any questions as best I can. And I will formally move that the council adopt the financial statements as recommended by the Finance Committee.
All right. It was Mr. Coleman who requested that this be taken off the consent agenda, but he appears to have left the meeting.
He said he was heading in.
Heading
his
in?
laptop battery died. He said that in the chat, I guess.
Did he say when he would get here?
He just said he was going to be joining us in the room shortly, but.
Well, given the fact that it was his request that we have this discussion, I'm going to ask Mr. Shaken if he would withdraw his motion, and we will do the next item on the agenda, the Transportation Advisory Committee charge, and then go back to the financial statements.
I'm not going to withdraw my motion, but I will move to table this item at the end of.
All right. Until the end of
when we pick it back up, there will be a motion on.
Okay, good.
But we need to vote on that and have it be second.
All those,
Second.
is it, all right.
Second.
Wait a minute, the motion is to move the agenda item that is old business B to the end of new business.
No, motion is to table the agenda.
To table the agenda item to the end of new business. All those, there's a second, need a second?
Yes.
Moved by second by Mr. Bruder. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, done. Now, proposed revised Transportation Advisory Committee charge. Who's going to present this? Wait a minute, this came out of
Yes.
Committee on Committees, right?
Yes.
So this is a Committee on Committees motion?
Yes.
Mr. Bruder.
Thank you. As somebody who's also on the Transportation Advisory Committee, I can tell you we had a lot of, good cooperation and working together to try to make sure that we had updated this charge. As many of you are aware, the Committee on Committees is dedicated to the effort of reviewing and, if needed, revising and updating all charges for all the various committees throughout the town. So this is the one that has gone back and forth and been approved by both, and it lists out composition and also the charge itself. Right now, it's not as specific in terms of its composition, and so if you're having questions as to, the composition itself, I can tell you just from my own recollection, having two town councilors is useful because at least when I'm at the meetings, I can provide some insight as to what we've discussed, at our meetings here in terms of what might be supported in terms of construction. And that's, again, I think also why you have planning and zoning members, and 5 residents, all of whom would offer a different perspective as to, a walker versus a bicyclist or that sort of nature.
And is the composition of the committee the most significant change?
Yes. From the review in the Transportation Advisory Committee, they've been doing some of the other things that are in the charge, but this puts it more in writing and formalizes the process so that it's more transparent.
And is there a motion from the committee, or is this something?
The Committee on Committees made this recommendation to have it be reviewed and hopefully adopted by the council. It does
Right.
not need a second.
So would you make a motion?
I move to adopt the following resolution. Should I read it in its
I
entirety?
don't think you need to read the whole charge, but
Resolved to adopt the following revised Transportation Advisory Committee charge as stated on page 147 through 148 in our meeting packet today of November 14th, 2022.
thank you. Ms. Cotton? No, not for a committee motion. Does anybody wish to comment or ask questions on this proposal? Mr. Sharon?
But just to state the other, this is all, everything this body does is advisory. There's no final authority. It is, however, to present a report annually to the council.
Correct. That is one of the new updates as per our wishes to have the committees come before us as an advisory committee and make that advisement. So for instance, at our most recent meeting, we were discussing the possibility of having a roundabout at Maple Road on 275 and a light or another roundabout at Separatist Road on 275, directly because this has been something that residents have wanted, both bicyclists, pedestrians. It's been something as a driver, you may have noticed it just coming onto Separatist from, coming onto 275 from Separatist Road. And then what they may advise is what, from their perspective, the council should do, but at all times, the council is the final deciding member in terms.
And do they also advise the department?
Yes, they work closely with John Carrington.
Mhm.
He's on the committee, and he and the Transportation Advisory Committee are going to, we're actually having a special meeting next month that will try to focus what that committee would like to have in part of the budget process before the budget process gets really in swing with, so that when Mr. Carrington makes his recommendations to Ryan, or Steve, town manager, sorry to use your first name, and is going through that process, we'll have some of their input at the beginning of that before, it's presented to us as a council member, as councilors.
And at this point, are there already 2 council members on it?
I believe I'm the only one on it right now.
Which means we'd have to make another appointment.
And it says, to be honest, the charge is if possible. So that, what I've been told in the past prior to my even being on the town council is that there were council members who may have been named to the committee but weren't actually attending.
Active members.
Active members, there we go. That's a better way to put it.
All right. Further discussion of this recommendation? Mr. Carrington, do you wish to make a comment on the recommendation? There are two counselors. Okay.
I just make a,
Mr. Ellsworth.
yeah, just a quick comment on this. So I think the Transportation Advisory Committee, the TAC, has tremendous potential to be a vehicle for good and stakeholder engagement, and for all the reasons that have been discussed, to be a conduit for a lot of really good ideas, back and forth to the department, to staff, and ultimately, for the community to move forward and achieve a lot of its transportation safety goals, its complete streets goals. I do feel somewhat duty-bound, compelled to say on the record that I do think, like anything, the devil will be in the details, and there's probably a better way to put it than the devil will be in the details. But I feel strongly that, the staff is subject matter experts. The professionals of the town employees obviously need to have the ability to operate within their sort of sphere of influence, and just to make sure that I think the key word in all this is advisory. I know that question was asked. That counsel should be sought, that counsel should be provided as stakeholders to staff. I just know that there have been a number of communities that over time, mission creep can happen, and I would be concerned if the TAC became a quasi-governing body for, public works. I'm not saying that's the intent at all, just something I think that has to be, we need to pay attention to make sure that the committee adheres to its stated charge, which I think is written is with the best of intentions.
Well, I think we have the same situation with the Finance Committee, for example. And I think this council, in any case, has been fairly good at understanding, advising, as opposed to dictating. But it is an important distinction, and one that we will take to heart, and the committee should take to heart. Ms. Berthelot?
And to emphasize Ellsworth's point that this is really, can make a huge difference. The importance of getting diverse voices to the table and recognizing that how people are driving and how our roads are constructing are impacting. We largely think of it as the people who are driving, that we want to get people from one place to the other quickly. But we also need to make sure that their children are safe playing on the roads, that our stoplights and our crosswalks are all designed so that older people and people with disabilities can cross safely without worry. And so bringing these voices to the table is key. So make sure that we have that lens so that our community can be safe and a place where families feel that their children walking on the road are not taking their lives in danger. So I think it's an important time to have this conversation, and I'm so pleased to be voting for this, and I hope everybody supports it.
Mr. Carrington, do you have a wish to make a comment?
Since I got here, I've been on with the TAC, and it really didn't have a mission, so that it now has a mission and a focus, I think, is a good thing. I too am concerned, not with me, but maybe in the future, everybody changes, that it could become, you will do what we say, Director of Public Works. And I know right now we don't have that relationship at all, but that is a concern for somebody in the future reading this. Same concern I had with the Complete Streets policy, because the Complete Streets policy, when we adopted it, we realized that there were certain roads in this town that could never be a complete street, and new people come in, read it, and they want all roads to be complete streets. That can happen. It's just a concern.
Well, part of that's our job as a council.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Bruder.
I will say, if I made it seem too informal of a process, it's just because of how comfortable I think that the membership is with each other, and also with Mr. Carrington, because he, as I've come to know him, is Certainly willing to entertain any ideas, but also be grounded in what the execution may result in, so.
Okay. Reality checks.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Mr. Coleman abstains. Everybody else votes in favor. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the DPW presentation on roundabouts and the recent road safety audit. So, Mr. Aylesworth, you want to introduce Mr. Carrington, or do you want to just let him take over?
I don't think John needs too much of an introduction, but while he's pulling up the presentation, in recent council meetings, we have discussed both the topic of the road safety audit that was recently completed. Now the council, we've reported on that to the council. We've shared the audit in its totality. And as we were just talking about, the Transportation Advisory Committee, the TAC, in particular, but other avenues as well, have expressed a lot of interest in roundabouts. And in fact, roundabouts and consideration for the utility of additional roundabouts in town, because we only have one right now, is a finding in the road safety audit. So these two themes dovetail together, and I think staff was planning this briefing anyway, but I think Councilor Coleman requested that the road safety audit be put on the agenda for discussion today. And so without any further ado, I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you. As town manager stated, it did come up at the last meeting. Councilor Berthwatt and Councilor Coleman both asked for this to be on the agenda, so I said, hey, I'm free next council meeting. Let's get on there.
And your back's feeling a lot better.
And my back is feeling surgery. So we get a lot of concerns from citizens. I know you hear them all too. So we've heard everything since I've been here. Worry about safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, the speed of vehicles. Some people say our widths of roads are too narrow. Some will say they're too wide. People ask for speed humps in front of their house. A lot of people want to know when their road's getting paved. Some residents have lived here for 50 years and are still waiting for their road to be paved. Can I get a traffic signal at my intersection? We've had that. And recently, can you install a roundabout? So with that, we'll talk about roundabouts tonight. And bottom line up front to all of you, whatever you tell the Public Works Department you want to fund, we will build. We're engineers. We can solve any problem. Sometimes some take a lot of money and some don't take much money. Engineers' job is to do it as cheaply as possible, but with quality. So if you all decide you want a roundabout at every intersection, I'll make it happen. It's going to cost you, but I'll make it happen. That's my job. Roundabouts, I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with them, so I just want to go through a quick introduction. They're a one-way circular intersection which traffic flows counterclockwise around a center island. They differ from rotaries and traffic circles, so think of Columbus Circle in New York City if you're familiar with that, or go to Cape Cod, when you cross the Bourne Bridge, you hit a big circle. Those aren't roundabouts. Those are traffic circles. And rotaries, they have a little more chaotic operation. They operate under the same rules, but it's not as simple as a roundabout. And roundabouts
I don't understand what the difference is.
They're larger, much larger. Like you can't see, if you look at the picture here, you can see from one side of if you're coming to the intersection, you can see across it in most cases. But, you think of Columbus Circle, most cases you can't see all the way around. And there might be two lanes going around the circle or three, depending on how big it is. Then they're just larger and traffic can go a lot faster. And they probably have more accidents in them than a roundabout. I don't have data on that, but I just feel that, as the slide says, a roundabout is, you can travel at lower speeds, making them safer and simpler to use. So it creates safer intersections for all users. So if you think of a four-way intersection, you have a lot of opportunities for a crash, straight on, T-bone. So you're going to see an 80% reduction in severe crashes and 50% in overall crashes. It goes from 32 points of contact to 8 points of contact where you can have. So it does reduce accidents. It's very efficient, continuous flow of vehicles, reducing delay and congestion, so therefore it's better for the environment. There's less idling. You're not at a light idling. There's not noise. not consuming fuel and you're not accelerating to beat the light or get out of the light like happens out here. People like to get in that right lane and beat you going south on 195. Before you get into the roundabout, there's raised splitter islands so pedestrians can cross one lane of traffic at a time. So that makes it safer for them, gives them better opportunities for crossing, improved safety. They will not have the button though that other places have. They may have an RRFB in some of them, but you won't have the countdown of 20 seconds. And we all love when the person presses the button, crosses when they get the chance, and we all sit at the intersection waiting for nobody to cross. So it kind of eliminates that. And like I said, you won't have drivers speeding up to beat the light, so that reduces a lot of potential for accidents. And just want to make clear that we are very pro roundabout. If there's anybody saying I'm not pro roundabout, they don't know me. I love roundabouts. I proposed them. We've actually had 2 road safety audits. I proposed them, and all of them. I also sat on the CROG Eastern Gateway study, and every intersection they looked at, I said, how about a roundabout? They only went with one, but that was all the way from Bolton through Coventry in Mansfield. I pretty much said every intersection, how about a roundabout? I just think they work well. Connecticut DOT has become pro roundabout. Oh, I skipped one. Roundabouts on state roads, so if we look at 195 or 275, they're going to be larger than the one we have in town at Hunting Lodge, which is actually probably a little on the smaller end, but it works. The DOT used to be anti-roundabout. Whoever was at the top did not like to do roundabouts, so that person retired, and they're very pro-roundabout. They have a whole page, which I'm going to show. If you ever want to go to this page, you can learn everything about Connecticut roundabouts. And Connecticut DOT has completed 26 or has 26 proposed. So out of 169 towns and cities in Connecticut, only 26. So it's just catching on, and there's a lot of proposals out there. And here's the map. As you can see, it's very sparse for how many roundabouts are actually in Connecticut. Go to Massachusetts, a lot of them are rotaries, again, bigger than a roundabout, but you'll see a lot more, and you'll see a lot more roundabouts also. I click a link there. Sorry about that. What arrow? There you go. All right, so they have this website, and they show some roundabouts that they have on their priority list, and they have videos. There's Route 1 and 22 in Guilford, Route 110 and 111 in Monroe, and I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Norwich, but they want to take 7 intersections, lighted intersection, put in 6 roundabouts. Norwich is up in arms about it, not popular. They've stopped it right now. Their phase 1 was going to be 3 roundabouts, and a lot of business owners were concerned, and some businesses were going to lose their property. It's a great plan, but it takes a lot of buy-in, and that's one of the problems with roundabouts in certain areas. So this is a video to show a roundabout. Hopefully it's going to play. So this is the one in Guilford, Branford, North Branford. This is what it used to look like. So it wasn't a very good intersection at all. They built this, came in, constructed it, and it's going to show you this is how it works. There's a truck apron, so bigger trucks, if they need to, they can put their wheels up on that, or buses. You have snow shelf, landscaping in the center, so you can put in welcoming signs, things like that. They incorporated bus stops into this. Welcome sign. Splitter island, so pedestrians can cross there at the crosswalks. There's a bike ramp. If a biker doesn't want to ride through the crosswalk, they can dismount and go up that. There's sidewalks around it. And here's tractor trailer coming through, wheelbase 62, I mean, that's the distance, 62 feet from the front tires to the back tires, so it's actually about a 70-foot-long truck, and it can get around. Its back wheels are probably on that apron, but you can see everybody's moving, no waiting for lights, everybody's slowing down, which is a great thing. I think everybody's happy, and we're not having accidents and all that. Here they show a cyclist who was brave enough to stay in the lane. You can do that, or if they're not comfortable, they can dismount and take the sidewalk. And landscaping in the center. That's an example of one. They're not cheap. That one there costs $3 million. Luckily, they got 80% federal funds and 20% state funds. It was probably through the LOTSIP program, the Local Traffic Capital Improvement Program. The one in Monroe was $4 million. And the one in Route 82 in Norwich, just the first phase for the first 3 roundabouts of the 7 or the 6 was $20.4 million. Prague actually did a study of the entire area of Prague. They looked at 8,158 intersections. They selected the top 300 for future study. Only 3 of our intersections made their list. See them there. Number 40 was 44 and 195, or otherwise known as Four Corners. 195 and North Frontage Road down in southern Mansfield with Route 6. And 44 and 32 on the west side of town. Separatist and South Eagleville Road did not make the list. Separatist and Maple Road did not make, Maple and South Eagleville Road did not make the list. And my interpretation, and I have learned some information today that maybe it's not entirely true, but I took this as if you're not on that list, it's going to be hard to get support through CROG and state for roundabouts, but I may be able to since they want to do it a lot, and if we're interested, they may help us out. So there was some promising news there. And another way I looked at that is I always see Mansfield as there's probably on a given day all 169 towns represented in the town of Mansfield. So if we can teach people that come here how to use a roundabout, they go home. Say, why don't we have a roundabout here? So maybe that would be a good thing to use to the state. Hey, you can put in a roundabout here. We'll educate the entire state. The parents will take it home, or the kids will take it home, and eventually everybody will be pro roundabout. Because I think once you get used to them, they're a great thing. So the problem with the cost of it, if we do not get funding, $3 million, that's, if you say, okay, let's put in a roundabout, but we're not going to increase the budget. The capital for the DPW is going to stay at what it is. Well, that's all my capital, actually a little less, but this last year. But normal year, it's about $3 million. So if you say we're going to put in a roundabout, that means I'm not paving any other roads, I'm not buying any new vehicles, I'm not putting in guide rail, I'm not putting in drainage, I'm not doing all the normal things that I've been doing and I still need to continue to do. So if we want to do a roundabout, I think it's additional funding if we don't get some kind of grant. But again, we can do whatever you guys want to fund. We looked at roundabouts in engineering, and these are the ones we'd like to do. We want to do with the Community Challenge Grant, one at Maple Road, 275, and we also want to do one at Maple Road and Spring Hill Road at the end of our complete street down by the middle school. We'd like to do it there. That one's we control. The other one, state obviously has to be involved. If we can get grants, we'd like to do those two. Then our next one we see Four Corners. From the road safety audit in 2016, we suggested that, and it's our #1 ranking in the CROG at number 40. And the other two, and then we'd also, if we could get a grant, I think one right out here at 195 and 275 would help move traffic. Because the other thing it does, think of Four Corners, there's 5 lanes of traffic at Four Corners if you're traveling south, north, but on 195, you would reduce that down to 1 lane entering a circle and going around. And maybe the state would say you need 2 lanes there. That's a more complicated one. But that's one we'd like to do too.
John, hypothetically, if the Mansfield Apartments redevelopment project came to pass, what bearing in your mind would that have on the utility of a roundabout at 195 and 275?
Over here,
Yeah.
I think it would help. I mean,
I'm just
I
curious
think-
because it's a pretty transformational project, and I'm sure when Croc last did its list, that project was never
Okay.
considered. It was on the horizon, so, okay.
I know my predecessor wanted to do it when downtown stores were being built, and back then, in those days, like I said, DOT was anti-roundabout. I think if we were building downtown stores today, and that would suggest that they probably would have put a roundabout in there. Not that it's easy, there is some, it isn't just plop it on the ground, there's some elevation differences and things like that.
How much space in diameter would, I mean, what I'm thinking is, they seem to be fairly space intensive. So would you have to buy land from surrounding owners? You obviously couldn't do just an easement because you're going to really occupy the land.
Yeah, it would depend on what the current right-of-ways are, but yes, you would probably have to purchase because you're going to be on, maybe it's just an easement for the safety zone or something, but it depends on each situation.
I know that in talking with some of our fire guys in particular, the Hunting Lodge Road one, that they have a difficulty getting the trucks through the intersection. And sometimes we'll go a different direction rather than, and I'm wondering how that's going to impact if there actually is a fire there, say perhaps on Birch Road or on Hunting Lodge. In addition to that, I have observed and been in the recipient of when traveling southbound on Hunting Lodge, going into that intersection, someone, instead of going around the roundabout, cutting on the inside and almost getting hit head on, and it happens quite frequently at that intersection. I don't know what to do about that with respect to that, but the first tranche is firemen saying they don't like that intersection because they can't get the trucks through it or turn the corner onto Hunting Lodge, and then the second piece is
Don't know if your microphone's been on.
it is, yes.
Okay, couldn't hear.
It's not designed perfectly. It should be designed so a fire truck can get around it. It has to slow down, but it can mount the tires easier. It's not like the ones I've shown in the picture. It's a little too small, and it also shouldn't allow somebody to go the wrong way. Like I haven't seen that, but I've heard about that also. So I will say my first boss in town, Matt Hart, asked me to remove that, but I just haven't gotten around to it. It's because it hasn't functioned as great as it should.
Well, I bring that up because in particular, when a pumper truck fully loaded with water goes around that, and when you get that water sloshing, it makes the drivers quite nervous, wondering whether they're going to flip the truck over.
Understood. Fortunately, we haven't had that happen I don't know how long it's been there, but it's been there longer than I've been here.
Yeah. It's getting kind of late. Let's let Mr. Carrington finish.
That concludes the roundabouts. I don't know if anybody had questions on that. And then also, we had a road safety audit. That's a formal safety performance examination of existing roads by an independent audit team. It's a qualitative to look at the road safety. It's an additional tool. It's not something like when OSHA comes in and says you do this or you get fined, and you get fined and do it, but it's more just a document to help you out. And this all came about, unfortunately, last November, we had the fatality. We met with DOT. I think it was the mayor who asked what they could do, and they said they could do a road safety audit. I'll give you credit. And then, or maybe you said add Route 195 to it. I think that's what you did. Yeah.
Yes, because I was concerned about
Yes.
the road in front of Doors Center.
Yes. So instead of just 275, we looked at Route 195. It was conducted in late April. We got the final report September 9th. As short-term, medium-term, long-term recommendations to improve safety. An RSA is focused on road safety. It's had a multidisciplinary team, so we had, I want to say, about 8 DOT engineers out there and other people from DOT. Had Derek Delay, myself, had the state trooper, had Yukon's the police lieutenant, had some Yukon representatives. We didn't want to get too many people involved because that was a big team walking down all the road, and plus the independent contractor for the state that actually did wrote the audit. Again, common misconception, it's not auditing the quality control design. Sometimes you don't design a road exactly how the book says, but it can still work out, is basically what this slide says, that they're not coming in and saying, oh, you should have put in a 45-foot wide road instead of a 47-foot wide road. How did you make that mistake? It's not that at all. For the area, we went from Birchwood Heights all the way up to Bishop Circle, Mansfield Road on the Yukon, where you're entering the Yukon campus, and on 275 from the intersection 195 out to Separatist Road. These are the average traffic daily volumes. So you can see, 13,000 people basically on 195, and somewhere in the 10,000s on 275, and the off-roads 4,000, 1,500. These numbers, they took the highest because of COVID, and sometimes the study's done when Yukon's not in session. So these were the highest numbers over I want to say a 4-year average. So they came up with a whole list of recommendations. In their legend, blue is short-term, medium-term, long-term. So these are all things they are recommending. Again, it's not you must do these. It's, if you want to improve safety, these are some things you should do. Not going to go through each one. This is specific to Dog Lane 195 intersection. When I first got here, I asked DOT put in a crosswalk here, and they were not receptive to it. The road safety audit is saying put one in. DOT, I think, agrees with it. You put in some kind of island also to make, again, safe, and there'd be some changes to this intersection because right now there's a concrete left turn. Oh yeah, so you can only turn one way. So this, I think, is a good recommendation. Again, it's in medium term, so this is something that I can put into a future capital improvement because it's going to be on the town to do it. Even though the state's involved in a state road, they're going to say, "Town, you do it," and we can look for funding. But I think that would improve that area. And this is out on 275. Right now, the crosswalk is on the west side of Eastwood. They're proposing moving it to the east side. So you'd cross here, cross over. It would have been nice when we did the Eastwood sidewalk project that somebody recognized that and said, cross over here, but that didn't happen. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes an accident for things to be recognized. These islands, we'd like to put down a boulevard concept down here. We're hoping with the Community Challenge Grant, with the Eagleville Green project over here, that we'll get the funding for that. And we were interviewing firms to design that today. We had RFQ interviews today, request for qualifications. So there's they're pretty simple when you look at them. They're not going to be, again, cheap, but they're pretty simple, and it will get people to slow down, make it safer for pedestrians and cyclists. Like I said, Community Challenge Grant should address some of the proposed ones on South Eagleville. The others we can put in a future capital budget request. We'll search for other grant possibilities, always looking. And the thing will be, we need to look at all those other things I have to do as Public Works Director with these and, come up with prioritization or an increase in the budget. Handle it. I think that's it. Any questions?
Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. I want to go back to the roundabout question a little bit. And so first, I'm just sort of curious. Why am I feeding back? I'm just sort of curious. about some of the priorities. And so in the like very scientific study that I've done, which is places that I've driven often in my life that I've almost died or almost killed someone at most frequently, the intersection of 195 or of 275 and 32 seems like one of the biggest bottlenecks in town at rush hour. And because of the hill on Route 32 coming south, especially, it seems like one of the places where you have the least warning of a backup. You crest the hill and all of a sudden there's somebody stopped very close to you and you're going whatever the speed limit is or faster, which is only barely enough time to stop, and then you're worried someone's going to crest the hill and slam into you. So I'm just curious if that intersection has been thought about and why it's not part of the priority. It's certainly an intersection that, at least with the prior owner of the only house that's on it, or one of the two houses that's on it, we heard quite a bit about in terms of complaints. He had a number of accidents in his yard.
Yeah, I'm sure CROG looked at it. I don't know what all their criteria was, but they just said probably the amount of land to take to put something in proper would they have the historic church. You would get into our property with the School of the Arts. There'd be a lot of taking because that is a very small intersection. I agree. It would, you're going to get into all four corners of those properties, and there's an elevation change, so it wouldn't be simple, and that's probably, I don't know what their criteria was. For me to come forward to that, I have to get funding. I got to imagine if a normal roundabout's $3 million, that's got to be $6 million at least.
And so then, I guess similarly, when you look at Separatist, two roads that intersect with 275 that folks came to us with last council meeting, the intersection with Maple Road seems relatively straightforward in terms of construction. It's mostly flat, relatively open space, one side of it, but the intersection with Separatist Road, which seems like where more of a bottleneck and backup happens, with everybody traveling across town to go to Goodwin right now to pick kids up in the afternoon. But there's much more complicated topography there. There's a pond down below, there's a hill up to the condo complex on the other side of the road. Do you have a sense of, from a cost perspective, what the cost difference between a roundabout at Maple and a roundabout at Separatist might be? I know you haven't spec the whole job out, but I'm just curious.
Ballpark, they're very similar, be about the same price. Derek and Tim in my office have actually, designed a rough sketch of what that would be, and that it actually will fit at Separatist, even though everything you noticed is there, but we can make it work. It can fit without major work, like at the other end of 32 and 275. So ballparking $3 million each. Could be less, could be a little more.
That's helpful. Is from a road safety audit sort of perspective, I know the challenge grant's already been written, but is there thought to tie all of that in essentially to go all the way down that part of South Eagleville Road to what, if we get that grant, what we might do, or is this would be a totally separate thing?
We would hope we'd have enough there it would take care of Maple, but it wouldn't get down to Separatist. Separatist, we'd have to. But again, like I said, talking to one of the individuals today, he used to work at DOT, and he said, just because you're not on that list, I would still go straight to the roundabout committee, see if they have any interest. And again, I thought of that. We have 169 towns. We can educate on roundabouts. Maybe that'll be a selling point that can help.
Thanks.
And the grant's already been received, so I don't think we can add to it, although we might be able to get a modification within it.
I'm not too familiar with that grant, but I know like lot SIP, sometimes you can add things to it. So
It's the first time the grants existed, so not really a track record for it.
Ms. Cotton, followed by Mr. Osberger.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It was enlightening, and my question may seem a little silly. However, as one who has been stationed and lived in Europe, where roundabouts are quite common. We had to even have special licensure. We had to have an international license and take a test on right of way, especially as you approach a four-way stop or roundabouts, because they can be quite confusing. So I did look at some of the YouTube clips that were provided, and one of them even gave me pause as I saw people speeding around because people seemed not to know who had the right of way, even as they're merging and trying to go around the curve. So I know that you talked about there'd be a learning curve and there'd be some training. Is that already embedded in the proposal, so to speak?
No,
I mean, do you have it?
It would just be education through our Facebook page and all that. If, if we build one, we'd have enough time to show, and they have, like, the DOT did, I don't know if you watched the Norwich one, but it shows the animated, we could put an animated show on and what you do, but everybody, you yield going into it. So if you're in the circle, you have the right of way. So if you're coming to the circle, you have to stop, yield. But if nobody's coming, you look, nobody's coming, you go right in.
That's the tricky part. Thank you, though.
Mr. Osberger.
Well, to Ben's point, but he kind of left. I think the intersection of Maple Road and 275 would present some challenges. I believe the north side of that, of 275, has a significant drop-off, and again, it's almost similar to the rise on Route 32, where you're coming into that intersection, traveling eastbound. It's kind of you don't really see the other side of the intersection until you've actually crested the hill, so I don't know if putting a roundabout there would be very safe.
The roundabout would shift into Maple, you'd bring it. You're probably thinking the center would be right in the middle of 275. The center would probably be more in that's where that island is on Maple. It would shift.
I see.
So, you play around with the entrances and exits.
I see.
But you're right, there is a drop off there, so we do have to take that
On the
into
north side,
consideration.
yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, John, about how many square feet does a roundabout take? I mean, we're talking about one right over here at 275 and 195. It would look like you would probably have to take some real estate there to accomplish that.
Yeah, it's like I said on the one slide, it's at least 100 feet diameter. So
It'd be kind of a tough thing to do out here when you think you might.
It's not easy, and you have where the Brown House is, goes up a hill and all that. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that one would ever happen, but I do know, Lon, when he was director, back, like I said, he wanted to put one in there. So I know he probably there's probably a drawing somewhere in our office where he's actually made it fit. But that was before the Wingstop building was built and all that.
Thank you.
So we have a project on the CROG list, which is 44 and 195.
Yes.
And what do you think is the likelihood that that will be built?
Well, I think it's a big list, so I think we would have to approach Prague and say we're very interested in it, the next LOTSIP grant, something like that. So if that's an interest, and TAC will discuss this first, I would imagine, if that's one of the ones we want to go for.
Okay.
I think it would be great, and again, that's probably where most the students come through, or the parents come through on freshman move-in day, to have a roundabout instead of backups. But it's complicated there because then you have the next 320, that light, you can't have that light there, so there'd have to be some kind of, it wouldn't be an inexpensive project, but it would be a good project.
So we're number 40 on the CROG list. Is your guess that they'll get to 10 or 20? I mean, is this
There
just
seems to
all
be
wishful
there's a
thinking?
lot of money coming, so there seems to be, roundabouts seem to be the thing everybody's excited about right now. So I think if a town says they want, because there may be towns in front of us that don't want it, so 40 may be a good position to be. But it doesn't mean, again, we have to do it. If we don't want it, or we want to do one that's not on the list, have to tell them why.
Okay, let's come back to the safety study for a second. There's a whole bunch of stuff on 195 and on 275 that they recommended, some of them expensive, some of them not so expensive. What do you foresee is happening as a result of that plan?
In the road safety audit, well, the RRFBs, the state is putting in the rapid rectangular flashing beacons, similar to the one down by the bank, so they were supposed to be put in this summer. The project got delayed, but those will be put in at the crosswalks, the mid-block crosswalks. This next summer, we're first on the list to be put in. On 275, I'm hoping with the grant, we can package it all in. Like I said, we just interviewed 5 firms today. We're going to pick one to come up with the design for the sewer, for the Eagleville Green, for the boulevard concept. Look at the roundabout. We're moving forward. Again, that's going to come down to funding, and it's not those things. Big projects like that don't happen in 1 year.
Okay, well, the one that my personal interest is the crosswalk in front of Dog Lane. So is that ever going to happen?
I think it can. I think it should. Like I said, it was one of the first things I requested. I've probably here for 2 months. I sent a letter to DOT saying put in a crosswalk here, and they were against it. 8 years later, 9 years later, they like it. So.
Okay.
But of course, we got to fund it.
There was also some discussion about the layout of the intersection of 275 and 195 and the very sharp left turn that you have to take coming out of 275 onto 195. Was there any proposal to do anything there, and do you think anything will happen there?
I don't recall anything in the audit on that.
Okay. What would you like from us?
Just to, when we come forward with what we propose to, fund it, I guess. That's the money.
All right, well, we'll be watching. Mr. Aylesworth?
I just want to say, is 140 or 150 roundabouts that Carmel, Indiana, population 100,000, north of Indianapolis has? So one city in Indiana has like 5 times the number of roundabouts that the entire state of Connecticut has. It's
yes, but
flat Midwestern grid. No, the topography is very helpful.
And the roads weren't, given to the king first, like Codfish Falls and Chapeyville were, the King's Road at first.
So you're saying it doesn't always pay to be first, okay.
We don't have the grid system.
Ms. Berthelot.
Just want to thank Mr. Carrington for his presentation, and say unequivocally, I do hope that you'll pursue the money for the roundabouts. I do think they are the right way to go. I see eye to eye with you on this, that they make a great deal of sense for traffic calming, and they're better for the environment. And it seems like we do have the space, particularly at Maple, so I hope you will pursue that funding, and I hope we get it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Well, thank you once again for spending your time with us.
Always a pleasure, Madam Mayor.
Right. I know. I'm sure it is. At least it's not 10 o'clock. Okay. All right, the next item on our agenda is appointment of members to the Ordinance Development and Review Subcommittee. The council had a committee to recommend additions to our Chapter 101 of the Mansfield Code of Ordinances relating to the sale of alcoholic beverages. A couple of years ago, we added a number of categories. We added them because we knew that there were people interested in pursuing these particular kinds of developments which had not yet been allowed. The history of this is that the state law required us originally to get 1,500 signatures on a petition to make any change in our own law, ordinances regulating alcohol. And it actually required an amendment to the state law to get this changed. And when I went to the Capitol to lobby for this, legislators were amazed that it was still there in the statutes. It passed, I think, in a consent agenda ultimately. But we are now free to amend our ordinance, our alcohol use, the sale of alcohol beverages ordinance at will. So we did amend it to add a number of uses, but we limited those to some uses that we knew there were people who are interested in pursuing. Planning and zoning added a number of additional uses that they would permit, even though they were not going to be approved by the possible under the ordinances. However, now there are some people who are interested in pursuing these additional businesses, and so we are being asked to add these particular categories to our ordinances. Now, we had a committee at that point, ordinance review committee, made up of Mr. Osberger, Mr. Shaken, and Mr. Kotchenberger. Mr. Kotchenberger is no longer on the council, although I believe he's in a place where alcoholic beverages are probably even flow even more freely than they do in rural Connecticut. So I have asked both Mr. Shaken and Ms. Cotton if they would continue. I neglected to ask Mr. Osberger, how did he manage to escape when I was going to appoint him to a committee? Yeah, he was on the first one. I'm going to assume he's interested in continuing. So the motion in front of you on page 176 has blank spaces. And I would recommend that I would ask you to put into those blank spaces Mr. Shaken, Mr. Osberger, and Ms. Cotton. Would somebody like to move this motion, Mr. Bruder?
Thank you, Your Honor. Flashback to work. Move to appoint counselors Cotton, Shaken, and Osberger to the Ordinance Development and Review Subcommittee relative to reviewing possible additional classes of alcohol permits to be authorized. And if the purpose of such ordinance is deemed beneficial, will work directly with the town attorney and town staff as appropriate to prepare a corresponding draft ordinance that is subsequently presented to the town council for formal review and consideration.
Do I have a second? Mr. Coleman seconds.
Mayor,
Yes.
I hope we all can vote for this.
Thank you. Any further comment? You have to warn Mr. Osberger not to leave the room. It's a dangerous thing to do.
I'll take the blame as the movement.
Okay. All those in favor of this, please raise your hand. It's unanimous except for Mr. Osberger. All right. Next item on the agenda. We have drafted zoning regulations for cannabis establishments. Our guest stepped out momentarily. Yes, this is what he was interested in. Mr. Osberger, you're now a member of an ordinance review committee to study alcoholic sales. Ms. Kaufman, welcome back.
Thank you. As we stated in your AIS, and as we referred to you, back in October, on October 26th, the Planning and Zoning Commission referred the draft cannabis regulations to you for review and comment, as is common practice. But because the council had been interested in this back when Linda Painter was here, I thought I'd come specifically and kind of talk with you about this. We did, as you recall, a community survey, and over 625 people responded. There was a lot of support for cannabis establishments, and where PZC landed after looking at other towns' regulations was to draft a regulation to allow retail establishments in the Four Corners area, PB3, and then also in the Eastbrook Mall area, PB1. There would be a separating distance of 500 feet from from other cannabis establishments and also from churches, parks, and places of worship. So that's basically it. The moratorium will expire on December 30th, so they are having a public hearing on December 5th, and they'll take public comment, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Shaken.
My assumption looking at this, but just to state it, is that the downtown is excluded because of its proximity to Leo Smith.
That was where they were landing. I think they wanted to go slowly. They wanted just to see how this works out. But yes, and if you looked at the community survey, people were supportive of that. But I think that ultimately, people were most in favor of the Four Corners and the Eastbrook Mall area.
Mr. Osberger?
Yes, back in the day when I had my restaurant, we had, which was placed on campus, we took advantage of an opinion written by Mr. Blumenthal, and that was that anything on state property is exempt from local ordinance. Okay, so that any place that UConn owns property, if it just happens to have a retail frontage on it, if they decide to put a cannabis thing in there, it would be exempt in anything that we do. Just so that you know.
I have not heard that UConn was interested at all in having a cannabis operation. In fact, at one point, somebody I spoke to was really surprised that the town was in favor of having one near campus. But who knows? I'm not going to say anything. We have not heard one way or the other. Mr. Shaken.
With the exception of the student union on property that's currently being used for retail, that is not subject to the town zoning regulations.
There probably are a few. I know there's a few cafes on campus, things like that. But yeah, I don't.
There's no piece of property that you or I might consider, off campus.
The
even
bench
though
and gift
UConn
store.
owns the
Yeah.
property, right?
Yeah, something like that.
The bookstore.
Well, the bookstore.
On-campus
The
bookstore, not
on-campus
this
bookstore.
Correct.
UConn no longer owns
Correct.
any
yeah.
of the property that the downtown sits on.
No,
Correct.
but I meant
Right.
the on-campus bookstore.
Right.
Which is a private entity. Is that it? Okay. Ms. Berthelot, followed by Ms. Cotton.
So, included from your churches, what were the other categories?
Let me just look at that. So it shall be located within 500, let's see. They cannot be located within 500 feet of any other cannabis establishment, within 500 feet of any child daycare facility, church, public park or preserve, playground, or public or private school when measured using a direct line between any part of the premises and any part of a lot used as such.
I'm sorry, I didn't put my hearing aids in. Could you talk a little more slowly and a little louder?
Sorry. I
My
have
fault.
known to speak very quickly, so I'll try to be. Within 500 feet of a child or daycare facility, church, public park or preserve.
Can I stop you with church?
Yeah.
Why are we saying church, not,
Places of worship?
yeah, it seems pretty significant.
I can make, that can be a comment,
Yeah,
certainly. Or just a place
Or
of worship.
religious establishment.
Yeah, yep.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Captures it all.
I will, we've been working with Heike Planning and Policy Group to kind of help us while we're short-staffed, so I'll ask them what other towns are doing, so I can bring that to their attention.
Could you read the rest of it?
Yes, church, public park or preserve, playground, or public or private school.
And hence, the EO Smith, well, 500, is it 500 feet over to the store center?
There are places where it would be 500 feet within store center, but right now, the way the regulation is written, it's only going to be permitted in the Four Corners area and the Eastbrook Mall area. So not in store center.
I'm just curious, you may not know this off the top of your head. Are businesses that sell alcohol, what is the limit for schools? What's the push away for?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I know that I believe there is some separating distance, but I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure actually that our regulations actually speak to that, but it might be per.
It's my recollection that some kind of special changes had to be made to allow for the sale of alcohol in store center, particularly for the liquor store, which is down the road, sort of away from the school. But even
Yeah.
it may be the store center guidelines lifted some of those regulations.
Have to check.
Strasburger?
I can remember this discussion when I was on zoning because I had brought up the history of my restaurant with respect to that, and I do recall Linda Painter saying that the regulations had changed with regard to that because my restaurant was on the old business block downstairs, and E.O. Smith being directly across the street, there was a lot of concern about us being open, and so we had to amend our opening hours to 4 o'clock in the afternoon after E.O. Smith had pretty much closed for the day. Now going forward, some of the concern was because of the daycare being there and whether or not the bar was going to impact the daycare. And of course, that was summarily pushed aside. And they didn't think that was going to be a concern. So apparently, Linda Painter said that the laws had changed in town and the ordinances and such.
Yep. Any further questions? What would you like from us on this?
This is purely an FYI, and we wanted just to come to you and talk to you about where the Planning and Zoning Commission had landed on these draft regulations.
And your hearing is December 5th?
That is correct, yeah.
So if members of the public wish to comment on this, that would be the place for them to go?
Absolutely.
At the moment, I don't, if the council wishes to make a statement on this, we would have to develop it and submit it to you before December 5th, if we wish to do so.
Correct.
Mr. Shaken?
Could I ask that we consider it at our next meeting? That we direct the mayor to work with town staff to develop a council statement of support generally for this, and that we approve the statement at our next meeting?
That was going to be because there's a meeting before the public hearing.
5th.
I don't know that we need to vote on the request if everybody has a similar opinion, but.
No, but a draft letter could come to the next meeting.
Which we would vote on.
Which we would vote on, right. Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, we're looking at 2 areas in town, Four Corners and Eastbrook Mall.
That's correct.
And those are dispensary outlets or?
Retail establishments.
Retail, okay. Are we going to be allowing any production or growing of cannabis, and if so, where?
That is not, PZC decided to kind of pause on the cultivation because they felt it was, well, we heard through public hearings on other things that maybe it was not, so the public wouldn't support that. So they wanted to I think they're trying to ease into this. So cultivation is not going to be permitted at this time.
Okay, but you'll possibly introduce it in the future?
Correct. I think they want to see how things progress through in other areas of the state.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Shaken?
With respect to what the gentleman asked about during public comment, he seemed to say he was he had a license to operate a transportation business, which you would need to transport from cultivator to retail, I would imagine, although I don't know specifically. Is all that we are doing at this point allowing for retail sales, so none of the other cultivation, processing, any of the other pieces that go into the legal cannabis industry will be permitted in Mansfield?
That is correct at this time. Our understanding, however, is that you grow it, you process it, you test it, usually all on one site. That's what we've learned. So, and I think the Planning and Zoning Commission really just wants to start slowly and see how things progress.
And,
But, yeah.
and so are we then going to be asked to extend a moratorium on the other things, or
No.
after, or is there a point at which just anyone can do whatever zoning allows?
The moratorium will expire, and then these will be the zoning regulations, is how I believe that works.
And will you need to modify like our existing agricultural regulations or anything? We're a farm by right town, and we don't tell people that they can grow corn and not wheat.
Right.
So will you need to amend other regulations to prohibit the cultivation?
Cannabis is not part of the state definition of agriculture, so we do not need to amend. Yeah, they did not do that.
And the gentleman's questions about transportation, since we're going to have a retail place, it obviously has to get there somehow, so there's nothing that we would do about transportation.
I believe that you can, I don't believe we can regulate transportation anyways, so, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Aylesworth?
Ms. Kaufman, could you confirm at one point, we believed that based on our population size, roughly 26,000, we could only have one cannabis retailer, but something has changed on that front, right? There's no threshold?
Correct. I believe the threshold has changed and there is no cap. So
Right, okay.
that's why we did the separation from 500 feet from another cannabis establishment.
Thank you.
Would there be a difference between a medical cannabis establishment and a retail cannabis establishment?
Probably not, no, but
So let's say that the medical cannabis place that used to be on 195 reopens as a medical cannabis.
Right.
That would mean that there couldn't be a recreational store within 500 feet.
I think they could be a hybrid. So they
Yeah,
could be.
they could be a hybrid, right?
Yes, right.
But
And then another retail establishment could be then 500 feet from
away
them,
from
is
them,
my
yeah.
understanding.
Doesn't make any sense, but I was just doing the hypothetical thing. You have your hand up, Mr. Shaken.
Can I extend that hypothetical? So my recollection from when medical became a thing and we were asked to weigh in on licensure applications as a council, and we did in support generally of folks applying for those licenses, is that towns by statute were not allowed to treat them any differently under their zoning regulations than a doctor's office or anything else, pharmacy. And so could someone open a retail establishment at Four Corners and then someone within 500 feet of that facility, for example, and then someone, that facility's license is still active, it's just out of business, decide to reopen it,
That
thus
was my question.
forcing the first person to close because they're now within 500 feet
And
of
they're
another
not a
establishment.
hybrid.
Right.
So I think if they were just, I'd have to do a little bit more research into this, but I do believe that if they were medical marijuana only, then a retail establishment probably could move right next door to them, but we'd have to really get confirmation from,
They're different, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
my understanding.
Ms. Cotton, followed by Mr. Osberger.
I just had one question. You were saying hybrid. Do you mean that's a place that would have medical marijuana as well as retail sales?
Yes.
Cannabis? I'm supposed to say
Yes,
cannabis,
that's
right?
correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Osberger?
Is the property that Yukon recently purchased considered in the Four Corners area?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was leading up to with saying Yukon property before, because I understand that the new development in the Rosales area will have retail, and there would be the potential that Yukon could also develop that property and also put retail in there and possibly put such establishments in place, and they would be exempt.
Ms. Kaufman, do you have any idea whether there's any limitation on the sale of cannabis on state property?
I do not, because I do know that you are not allowed to consume it in state parks, but I don't know about sale on state property.
Well, I think that in our discussions with the university, we could make it very clear that this is something that would not be in the interest of the university to pursue. We haven't heard anything that would indicate otherwise, but, I mean, the intention for the use of that property in the Four Corners area, we have been told over and over again, is to expand the tech park. And so that doesn't, unless they're going to do a research facility on cannabis, that doesn't seem to apply. But I can't predict the university, and I don't pretend to. So, Mr. Esberger.
And the follow-up is that, and that's why it was being, just that reason.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I had one more question as it relates to Yukon State Property putting up a recreational cannabis establishment. Isn't there an age limit? Is there an age limit for frequenting such a place? Like it would be
Yes.
like a liquor store?
Yes, I believe it's over 21.
Right, so they've got 18-year-olds on campus. That would be a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we be sure and say for the record that we have no evidence whatsoever that the university has any interest in creating such an establishment?
That's correct. We have no evidence whatsoever. All right, we're getting late, so let's pick things up. Thank you very much, Ms. Kaufman. I don't think we have any further questions. We will work on a statement of support. I have a pretty strong sense that, without asking for a vote, that's where we're going, right? Yes. And we'll vote on the statement itself. Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is the Mansfield Apartments redevelopment. And you have in front of you a fairly lengthy letter of complaint about the nature of this development. We have received a couple of complaints from members of the public, not as many as I had expected, frankly. Mr. Aylesworth, you want to introduce this, and Ms. Kaufman, you want to describe it? But I would like to get out of here before 10, so let's kind of keep our eye on the ball. And we still have financial statements.
Yeah, in the interest of expediency.
So this is, as you know, an environmental impact. You spent a lot of time on this with the painter during the scoping process. An environmental impact evaluation is really a high level, and in the Planning and Zoning Commission review, my review, engineering's review, the Traffic Authority, Parks and Natural Resources Conservation Commission. Basically, I think where we're landing is that there's 3 areas where there's concern. The first is really it's the consistency with the Plan of Conservation and Development, and the fact is that it's a dense development. It's going to be, there'll be 3 times as many people, 3 times as many cars, in an area that is in the Plan of Conservation and Development that is supposed to be a kind of a step down. In our future land use map, which is part of the POCD, which is really a guidance document, that area is designated as compact residential transitional. So, so that's an inconsistency. The second one would be traffic. I think the Traffic Authority reviewed that, and they had just some concerns about the traffic study and the parking. There's going to be 3 times the people living there, 3 times the people needing to get to the main campus, ingress, egress, curb cuts, all of those types of things. In addition, the parking, they did not do a formal parking study, and I think there is concern that folks may park here at Town Hall, and that may cause some difficulties. And then the adjacency to the Moss Sanctuary. So there's really been no baseline analysis of existing conditions at the Moss Sanctuary, so we don't really know what the impact will be. And there will be, as I said, three times the people cars. So there is a lengthy letter that I prepared. I incorporated the comments. It's a memo that the Planning and Zoning Commission has endorsed Paul Aho to sign, provided the town council approves this letter, and I'm happy to.
This evening, Ms. Weatherall commented that the objections did not include anything about increased pedestrian traffic on 195. Have any of your committees thought about that at all?
Yeah, I think we do speak to that. I think she was speaking, I think, crossing 195.
Right.
So, I mean, there is a general comment regarding pedestrian movement in that area. I mean, I think we could make that a little bit more specific, and I don't think that that would be inconsistent with what the Planning and Zoning Commission has put forth, but there definitely is a comments in the letter, but we could strengthen that.
Mr. Osberger?
And you may recall that when I was on zoning and we did inland wetlands, that they were trying to do the hockey rink there.
Yes.
And there was some concern that the surface area of the roof and the additional parking would increase the water runoff,
Yep.
which would also affect the Moss Sanctuary. Have we seen anything like that done?
I mean, because this is so high level, they will have to do a stormwater management plan. They did do some field delineation of the wetlands. There is a vernal pool that is located on the Moss Sanctuary. They're going to have to prove that there's no significant negative impact through a state permitting process. But those are also outlined in that letter. UConn has committed to working with the town on pedestrian improvements along 275. That's also kind of just reiterating that we want to encourage them to do that, because the EIE is so high level, we don't even know how many stories. It doesn't talk about how high the buildings will be. It just says 3 stories, 900 beds, 373 parking spots.
I heard 5 to 7 stories.
Well, this is what we hear, and this is the picture that we saw in the UConn Today rendering, but it's not stated in the EIE specifically. So we just wanted to put the density on the record.
Mr. Shaken, followed by Mr. Shuren, followed by Mr. Aylesworth, I believe.
Speaking of pedestrian traffic, maybe comment more specifically on just a hope that if something does move forward there, which eventually something will, that part of the consideration will be to work collaboratively with WRTD and the town to stop the bus stop outside of the community center, which doesn't have a sidewalk attached to it, and to instead use that property to drop people off. I'm sure the dichotomy exists because it's WRTD and UConn, but so many people get off the WRTD bus on 275 on the north side of it, on the town hall side of it, and then walk through town property on the grass, in the road, whatever, to get to 195 where they pick up another bus or walk to wherever they're going on the sidewalk. And the topography outside of town hall has made sidewalk there something we haven't done. But there's a whole pull-off right across the street for buses that could be used and would direct people to a sidewalk that has crosswalks. And anyway, just a thought, especially if the population grows there.
They did commit to looking at the public transportation routes and schedules as part of.
What is the state entity that must give UConn the green light for this to proceed?
Office of Policy Management is my understanding, yeah.
So we are communicating in this letter
To UConn.
To UConn.
Then they compile all of the information and they give that over to OPM. So that's how that's the general procedure that we've used always.
We would never, in addition, communicate directly to OPM.
I don't know that we have in the past, but we could look into that.
Well, yeah, along those lines, my question, I guess, was going to be a process one. So we have until November 18th, right?
Correct.
To submit written comments, and that's per the SEPA sort of statutory
that's-
timeline.
Yep.
So Planning and Zoning doesn't have another meeting scheduled.
That's correct.
And today's the 14th.
Correct.
So there's, notwithstanding what the council might be interested in doing, there's not really time, the time does not lend itself to amend the letter at this point.
And not and go back to planning and zoning,
Right.
right?
So, given that it's a jointly signed letter, I don't know that there's the council could obviously authorize the mayor to sign the letter pending something they'd like to see inserted, but I don't think there's a mechanism to get that included at this point. So I just think it's kind of take it as is, unfortunately.
Yeah, we can always continue negotiations with the university about our
Yeah,
concerns.
there are other
you know.
ways to communicate. I'm just
Right.
saying, for the purposes of this letter, though, the time might
Right. Is there a motion to authorize me to draft this, to sign this letter? See, it'll be on page 199. Where is it? I haven't gotten there yet. There we go. It's on page 200. Is there somebody willing, Mr. Shuren?
Move effective November 14, 2022, to authorize the mayor to co-endorse the letter to the University of Connecticut regarding the Mansfield Department's redevelopment environmental impact evaluation.
Second.
Second, Mr. Osberger? All right, Mr. Shuren, would you like to speak to your motion?
Well, this is a very forceful and very detailed letter, and if we can be reasonably confident that it will be given serious consideration, then it will be a positive step forward toward negotiated settlement.
Anybody else wish to comment? Mr. Shaken?
Thanks. Yeah, I support trying to make the university go through a full EIE. I think with the sanctuary next to it, they need to, but I want to be careful as a community, and this isn't this letter specifically, but just as a community generally, that we understand that the property across the street is currently vacant and was built in the post-war era. When students were living there pre-COVID, was a dump and had been for many years. It was a dump when I was in school 15 years ago, and there was a dump 15 years before that. And that at least part of our consideration needs to be that it's not great for our community to have a vacant piece of property in the heart of our downtown that is unoccupied. It's certainly not good for the businesses downtown. I'm sure they've felt impacts from a variety of places, but certainly having whatever the bed count at Mansfield Apartments be 0 since the pandemic has not helped them, given the foot traffic that they would have gotten from those residents. And something should go there, number one. And then number two, as far as the impacts on Moss Sanctuary go, Moss Sanctuary has always been adjacent to an apartment complex lived in by University of Connecticut students. And the problems that Moss Sanctuary uniquely has to deal with as a town park, like people having campfires there, having a little party in the woods, has existed since Moss Sanctuary was established. There's always been students living there, and those things have always happened. So, and it will be next to whatever they build. So whatever environmental impacts might happen on Sanctuary itself, it's always been one of the few town parks that we have that's directly adjacent to a lot of development. And so it's going to be different and environmentally different probably than many of the other sort of more wildernessy spaces in town because it's in the middle of a developed area. So I just want to make sure that we're being careful to be productive and constructive in our comments and not just reflexively say no when a development is proposed, especially in an area that we've already designated through our POCD or directly adjacent to an area that we would like to see developed as a community that has been developed as a community center of our sort of economic viability and engine in town. Thank you.
Mr. Aylesworth?
Yeah, just in the spirit of what Mr. Shaken's saying, I don't recall if this was shared in a previous council meeting or not, but I think it'd be a good time just to share it again if it was. So in some of the conversations we've had with senior UConn officials, talking about this project and before we kind of embarked on the review of the EIE, I just want to state for everybody's knowledge that UConn did respond, I think, very favorably to a suggestion that I had, which is, yes, they have a facility on campus that's sort of their community center equivalent. But if this project moves forward or some variation of it moves forward and there's a large concentration of college students living across from the Mansfield Community Center on 275, this creates a tremendous opportunity for the Mansfield Community Center to see a boon in its membership, its participation. You know, what we've been told about the project doesn't include competing amenities, you know, so, and Yukon officials have said that they would be very interested in working with the town collaboratively to find ways to incentivize Yukon student use of the community center. So we'll see where those conversations go. I just thought it was important to share publicly that they've, really expressed enthusiasm for that.
I think a good way to summarize our concerns about this is that they are environmental in the first place and aesthetic in the second place. But that this is a development that has the potential for being economically helpful to the downtown area and to the community center. So while we certainly want to have a say in shaping how it turns out, I agree that we don't want to take a position that's simply opposed. Mr. Coleman.
Comment. I think it'd be great if the University of Connecticut actually, within this development, provided some affordable housing for their own graduate students and their families. I mean, maybe someone could pitch that at them.
We'll talk with them. I mean, that's one of the things. Okay, so all those in favor of having me sign this letter, in favor of Mr. Shuren's motion, please raise your hand. We are unanimous, so get out my rusty, trusty blue pen and you get my signature.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, reports of council committees. Finance.
Thank you.
No,
Nope, we're
wait,
not
no,
done.
no, no.
Well, I'll do both.
Well, you'll do both. The first thing that come up is the financial statements.
Motion on the floor.
And there is a motion on the floor which has been tabled to this time. So, Mr. Shaken, please proceed with your motion.
I spoke to it earlier, but Brian pulled it off of consent and you were driving here. So I'll do the Cliff Notes. It's the end of the first quarter, so there's not a ton of variance from our budget. The two things to call out specifically from the finance meeting, I think, are sort of areas to watch are the cafeteria fund, because the state is continuing to pay for free lunch. They don't pay for all of it, just like the feds didn't pay for all of it, so we've continued to expend out of the cafeteria fund to make up the difference. State expects their program to end sometime at the end of the calendar year if they don't extend it. And then the other piece is the management services fund, which is what we call where everybody pools together to pay their bills. And so the primary cost in that is energy bills. And so with energy costs high and many of our buildings heated with oil, which is especially high, that may be higher this year than budgeted. And because we are currently heating 2 elementary schools now that the heat's on, it may be a little higher than what's been budgeted for. But both of those things are part of, frankly, the Board of Ed's budget. They just come into the town and go out because we pay things collectively. So I'll stop there since I said most of it earlier. I'm sure you have questions that I didn't
The question I
cover.
had was actually on the bonding. This total debt outstanding as far as bonds goes, $33,675,000. On the bottom, there's a note that says needs to be updated with the end of year, fiscal year 21-22 debt issuance. Does anybody know what that debt is and how much debt we'll be servicing now? I mean, we're standing at $33,675,000. We had to bond the school project. Does anybody know what our total debt is going to be, and has the bonds been secured and the interest rate locked?
So assuming staff will be called upon to answer this, rather than speculate and may perhaps give an answer that's not entirely accurate, I'd like to research this with finance and provide a response to the council.
Yeah, there's a number of notes if you go through the financial statements. And the notes are basically, the way Sherry explained it, that the transition to the Munis accounting system has meant that they are not able to close last year and simultaneously run budget sheets for the current year. And so as long as they haven't fully in Munis closed last year's books, they've basically gone through and manually added all of these things together rather than just pressing a button and running a report. And so there are various pieces of this report, and this is one of them, I believe, that haven't been manually updated or aren't available in the exact format that they normally are presented because of a software glitch that they're working with the vendor to work out. So she didn't tell us what the bond obligations were, so we'll have to wait for Ryan's answer for the specific answer to your question. But this is the reason there's that note there is sort of software related, is my understanding.
Anybody have any idea what the total debt is going to be? Bonding debt?
Again, I'd prefer not to guess, or I'd prefer not to estimate and give you.
Would it have been in the budget proposal for the current year?
Well, yeah, so our debt service increased by $600,000 or $700,000. Increased, I believe, from 600,000 to 1.3 million, or increased from 700,000 to 1.3 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. And that additional debt service that shows up in the general fund's debt service is attributable to the new elementary school and the middle school roof projects coming online. Those bond sales happened the last fiscal year. It's been a while since I consulted, the funding streams and the total amounts. I can say that even with the additional debt service that the town's taken on, GFOA, the Government Financial Officers Association, would say that aggregate debt service under 10% is basically a healthy range. And even with the debt service we've taken on for the new school, again, I'm trying to recall back to town meeting days and last spring, but I believe our debt service was less than half of that still. And so we would still be in a range that, and we, our AA bond rating was reaffirmed. And so, we have many fiscal indicators that say, based on where we're at in terms of aggregate borrowing, which this project was known at that time, we're still doing quite well.
Mr. Shaken?
We're referring to pages 98 and 99 of the packet. There is a breakdown on page 99 of the specific projects, and there are two specific projects. The lion's share, frankly, of the debt is two that have to do with the school construction. Our GO bonds, 15 million, and our bond anticipation notes of 11.5 roughly million. Of the 36.7, that 26.5 is taken up in new school construction and middle school roof. The new school being the bulk of those dollars, I'd imagine. The only thing that I don't know is what the minor changes are when this would be updated with the end of the year debt issuance from 21-22. And that's the piece that's not in these documents that normally, without this software glitch, would have been included in the end of the first quarter document. But we will see whenever we get an answer to the specific question when Ryan checks with finance.
Mr. Osberger?
I was curious how I could get a hard copy of these financials. My packet goes from 52 to 111.
So I think the hard copy, what probably happened there is the hard copy, I think, is available, or all of it in its detail is posted online, or the electronic packet, and the Finance Committee gets a hard copy of the statements. Is there a reference in here to see the Finance Committee packet? Okay.
Nope, in our packet.
Okay, well then.
So it's available electronically.
Should have been printed. I don't know why yours wasn't. You get one printed from the town?
Yep.
It was omitted. It's in the packet.
Clearly not.
One of the things that Ms. Tran discussed in your meeting that I observed was an 18% increase in medical costs last year, and in claims,
Claims.
yeah, and an expected 13% insurance rate increase.
Correct.
Could you talk a little bit about what that was?
That's what it is. Not much more detail than that. We had an 18% increase in claims from the folks that we insure. Scrolling for detail, it's on page 26 of your packet. If you go back and look through history, we usually don't have something that extreme, but occasionally we do. In fiscal 14, we had a 30% almost increase. Following year, it went down by 13%, gone down by 10% in some years. At this point, staff haven't gone through claims individually to figure out if there's like specific things driving it. I recall in 14, 15, there were 3 or 4 staff people who got really sick, and that alone was enough to drive up the entire town's claim experience. Sherry at the meeting speculated, I think more than anything, that this has happened across healthcare, which is true. Commercial insurers have said this is happening across the population because there was a lot of deferred maintenance of people who didn't seek care during COVID who are now seeking that care. And so Anthem has told us that they will be increasing our rates by 13% next year, which is, I think, also not an uncommon experience for employers right now. We luckily have a very, very overly healthy healthcare fund, and so the council has set policy on that, and at some point we'll be asked, I'm sure, to officially decide to use some of those dollars to smooth out the premium experience for our staff, which is one of the things that we've said we want to use the dollars for if needed. So I don't know the details of that yet. I don't think that's something, but preview, that's probably coming up sometime before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. We have to vote to accept these? Okay, and the motion has been made. Any further questions? All those in favor of accepting the finance reports? We are unanimous, except for Mr. Tony, who has stepped away from the meeting momentarily. He votes in favor. Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Personnel.
Oh, wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Do the rest of finance.
We had another thing on our agenda tonight, which was to talk about the shared services agreement, particularly between the town and the region. You can sort of read about it in our packet if you want details, so I won't take up too much. But suffice it to say that with Sherry's retirement and then subsequent return, she has realized that it would be crazy of us to expect a finance director spend as many hours preparing the budget as she did before she retired. And so Ryan and her have been working on trying to figure out if there's a way to either switch staffing around or pull the region out of the shared services budget portion of what we share services with the region with, in order to try to smooth that process out and perhaps provide better service to the region at a better price for them as well. And so we talked about it, I think, where everyone's in the very preliminary stages of the conversation. I would say my characterization is that Ryan and Sherry wanted to sort of check in with the council about it because the region has already sort of checked in with their board about it and get a sense from us, and they got some feedback, and I think are going to go back and think a little bit more about how to structure this in a way that would work for everybody. So I'm expecting the finance committee will keep talking about it every month, and eventually the council will get a document, a proposal for a change to the shared services agreement, which expired last year and needs to be renewed anyway.
Questions for Mr. Shaken? All right. Thank you. Personnel?
We have not met him.
Okay. Committee on Committees?
We had no business and canceled our meeting for the month over.
All right. Any reports of council committees? So we did that. I'm sorry. Departmental and Advisory Committee reports? Anything on petitions, requests, and communications? We've had a couple of items which we have added to future agendas already, but is there anything else anybody wishes to add to a future agenda? Mr. Aylesworth, do we need an executive session?
It'll be very brief.
All right, Mr. Shagan?
I move we enter into executive session to discuss strategy and negotiations with respect to pending claims in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes 1-206B. And to that executive session, we invite Ryan Ellsworth, Kevin Deneen.
I don't think Kevin's.
Oh, Ryan and Kevin, if Kevin's here.
If Kevin is here.
Seconded.
A vote.
Okay, well, we're still on the air.
Still got to vote, though.
All in favor?
All those in favor of going into executive session, we are unanimous. We'll take 5 minutes to clear the room and get off the air. I think so. I've never seen it before.